All right, good morning, everyone. This is the first quarter meeting of the New York State Fire Prevention and Building Code Council. It's 2022, March 4th, 2022, and the winter is slowly coming to an end. Maybe not so slowly, as it's supposed to be 63 degrees here in Albany on Sunday. So I'm happy we are all going to be outside again soon, and I think that's a good thing. We're also coming to hopefully to the end of a long, dark period where we hid from the pandemic, and now, as we can see, we're without masks. So hopefully we're coming out of this tough time. We have a very busy agenda today, much like the last meeting. We will work our way through a number of issues, including a declaration the legislature sent us on grease traps. We will work our way through a number of more restrictive local energy standards. We'll work our way through one more restrictive local standard. We have some updates from staff on the next code adoption and on other issues. So I have a feeling we're going to be going for a while, but we'll work our way through it. Okay, I'm going to pass. Oh, a couple other notes. I'm noting today that as of Wednesday, we have a new Secretary of State confirmed by the Senate. His name is Robert J. Rodriguez. Really great guy. I'm really enjoying working with him. He continued my designation as the designated chair, and I signed a new oath this morning, so we're set there. I'm also going to take a moment because it happened in between our meetings. I just want to acknowledge that we had a very difficult situation in the Bronx a couple of months ago with fatalities. So just taking a moment to acknowledge that happened. Obviously, there were a lot of investigation and people looking into it to see what happened, and if there is appropriate action for this council to take in response to that, we will do so. But for now, we're letting those investigations play out. But a very sad circumstance. Passing it to, thanks, Kevin. A couple more things. We have new staff members coming on because we have a very, very busy time ahead here with new uniform code adoption. We have major energy code changes coming over the next couple of years, led by us and Nyserda. So we're staffing up to handle that. And so I just want to make notice, Jeannie Rice is here. She's joining Kevin's team. We also have Dan Carroll back and he's joining the Energy Code Services. Code Services. That's it. Energy Code Services unit that we're staffing up to handle these things. So welcome to you. Welcome back to Dan, and off we go. All right, Kevin. Because we're still hybrid, Kevin's going to run through conduct of the meeting one more time. Go ahead, Kevin.
All right. Pursuant to Chapter 1 of the laws of 2022 and Governor Hochul's Executive Order 11, issued on November 26, 2021, and subsequent executive orders extending the state disaster emergency declared in Executive Order 11, this meeting will be held remotely by WebEx conference call. The public has provided access to register to attend the call, and then a call-in number was provided so that any interested members of the public can listen to the proceedings. Additionally, the meeting is being recorded and will be later transcribed. Because of these special features, we ask that each co-council member record their vote individually, both for establishing quorum and on individual items as needed. At this time, everyone's microphone has been muted. Any co-council member, panelist, or division staff wishing to speak, remember to unmute your microphone, state your full name, then speak. Anyone from the public wishing to address the code council during the public comment period should send a message through WebEx to either me or my code host, Chad Sievers. We will then collect information such as your name and address and who you're representing.
Thank you, Kevin. Okay, so let's establish quorum. Kevin, if you could run through.
Matt Tebow.
I'm here.
Ben Keller.
Present.
Michael Weber. Vincent Rappucciulo.
I'm here.
Joseph DeStefano.
Here.
Claudia Bramer.
Here.
Joseph Toomey.
Here.
Sean Hamlin.
Here.
Timothy DeRusha.
Here. Here.
I think somebody has their microphone unmuted, and so we're getting a little bit of feedback. Might be Dominic. Okay, Robert Hughes.
Here.
William Tyne.
Here.
Patrick Dolan.
I'm here.
Dominic Marinelli.
Here.
Thank you, Dominic. All right, I'm just going to check one more time for Michael Weber. I do not see him present. So we have 12.
12, so we have a quorum. I will note that there are currently 4 vacancies on this council. We are in the process of getting those handled. The most notable recent is because we have a new mayor of the city of New York, that seat becomes vacant until such time as the governor appoints somebody from the city of New York. So as soon as they do, I have a feeling we'll have Keith back, but until then, we need that to happen. So there are 4 vacancies, which takes us to a max of 13. We still need 9 to do any action. All right. Kevin, can we do the court reporter a favor here and just run her, she can see who's on the screen, but these name tags are a little difficult to see. So if you can just run through here.
Sure. So we have Sean Hamlin, if you could just raise your hand as I say your name. Sean Hamlin, Joseph Toomey, Timothy DeRusher, Emma Gonzalez Ladders, Matt Tebow, I'm Kevin Dewar-Clark, Joseph DeStefano, Robert Hughes, and Chad Severs.
Thank you.
All right. You will also likely hear a lot today from Ms. Peniota Hyde. She's the counsel to this council. and from John Adario, who is the special advisor to the council and also the director of the Division of Code Enforcement. I'm sorry, it's Building Standards and Codes. I go back way too long here, so I remember the old names. Kevin, before we move to the next agenda item, are there any changes to the agenda that the members should be aware of?
So we have one change to the agenda under agenda item, I believe it's number 6. We had the town of East Hampton as the second to last item on the agenda for that. They have rescinded the local law that they had filed, so we're going to remove them from the agenda, and I'll mention it briefly under the subsequent agenda items for items that we have received.
Great. Thank you, Kevin. Okay, I think we're done with the welcome, and even that took longer than it normally did. So yes, we are in for a bit of a slog today. Okay. Agenda item number 2, draft minutes, December 3, 2021, fourth quarter meeting of last year. You should have received the draft minutes in the packet that came to your email. Are there any changes requested to those minutes?
Chairman Tebow, this is Ben Keller.
Hey, Ben.
Just a very small technical item. The town of Cortland should be with a T. It's spelled a couple different ways throughout the document.
All right, we will check that and make sure we're spelling it consistently throughout the document with the T. Are there any other potential changes? Okay. All right, with Ben's change noted, because it is the correct spelling, may I have a motion to, Joe Toomey moves to approve them.
Second.
All right, I saw Tim's hand first. I suppose that's going to happen a lot today, so I'm sorry to the people on the WebEx. So I saw Tim's hand first. Tim seconds the motion. Is there any discussion on it? No? Okay, voice vote. All in favor of approving the minutes of December 3rd, 2021?
Aye.
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 Are there any opposed? All right, hearing none. Those minutes are adopted with the change noted by Ben. Agenda item number 3. Okay, we have a bunch of Department of State updates, so we're going to start with Peniota, who's going to talk to us about recent changes that impact the Uniform Code. Peniota.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to talk about some changes to Article 18 of the Executive Law, and I'm going to go in order in which they were enacted. So the first one is Chapter 333 of the Laws of 2020, which was also with Approval Memo Number 39, and Chapter 47 of the Laws of 2021, which went into effect on December 15th of 2020. And that added a new subdivision 4 to Executive Law 382 to provide that in addition to any other applicable remedy or penalty where a building has been altered in violation of the Uniform Code or any lawful order obtained thereunder, and such alteration impedes a person's egress from such building during a fire or other emergency evacuation, and the owner of such building and any builder, architect, contractor, subcontractor, or construction superintendent or agent thereof has knowledge of such alteration or should have had knowledge of such alteration based on either an inspection or repair of a leased premises with consent from the tenant, shall be subject to a civil penalty of up to $7,500. So it's another enforcement tool that is available for code officials. The next item is Chapter 507 of the Laws of 2021, which went into effect on October 25th, 2021. And that amended Subdivision 3 of Executive Law 382 to provide eligible petitioners greater and more timely access to courts in order to address the violations of the Uniform Code where the construction or use of a building is in violation of any provision of the Uniform Code or any lawful order obtained thereunder. A justice of the Supreme Court, a New York City civil court, a city court, district court, or county court may order the removal of the building or an abatement of the condition in violation of such provisions. And some of the language from the sponsor's memo, which is telling for why this change was made, was that requiring a local government to file with the Supreme Court is a significant hindrance to addressing outstanding code violations and dealing with buildings that are abandoned or in disarray. Filing for action in the Supreme Court is costly. It often takes 6 to 12 months before an initial hearing. So this amendment allows a justice of the New York City Civil Court, a city court, district court, or county court to exercise jurisdiction in these matters. So it's just more availability, again, to code officials through enforcement. And then the last amendment to 382, so all of these are to just 382 of the executive law, which is the remedies, is Chapter 571 of the Laws of 2021, which went along with Approval Memo Number 32. And this amended Subdivision 2 of Executive Law 382 to require the imposition of minimum fines for violations of the Uniform Code that remain uncured for an extended period. Specifically, violations shall be punishable by a fine of not more than $1,000 per day of violation or imprisonment not exceeding 1 year, or both, for the first 180 days, and for the following 180 days shall be punishable by a fine of no less than $25 and not more than $1,000 per day of violation, or imprisonment not exceeding 1 year, or both, and thereafter shall be punishable by a fine of no less than $50 and not more than $1,000 per day of violation, or imprisonment not exceeding 1 year, or both. So it's this kind of graduated fine schedule for the longer the violation remains uncured. And this actually went into effect yesterday, March 3rd. It's important to note, though, in the governor's approval memo number 32 that corresponds with Chapter 571, specifically noted that the approval of the bill should not be construed as support that would be appropriate for a court to impose only a nominal fine merely because a code violation has continued less than 180 days, or that it is appropriate for violations to be left uncured for any period of time, let alone more than 6 months. So, the hope here, I think, is to deter, obviously, violations and to remedy expeditiously. So that was Executive Law 382, all of those. Now I'm going to mention the amendment to Executive Law 378, which is probably what most people here would be more interested in since it impacts directly the Uniform Code. And this will segue nicely into the next agenda item, which is Chapter 753 of the Laws of 2021, along with Approval Memo Number 116, and Chapter 47 of the Laws of 2022, which will go into effect on March 22nd. And this adds a new subdivision 18 and renumbers the current subdivision 18 as 19. And the new subdivision 18 will add the requirement for the Uniform Code to include standards requiring that grease traps or interceptors located in a place that may be accessible by the public or located inside any food service establishment or located in any other building that is open to the public shall be designed and maintained to withstand expected loads and to prevent unauthorized access. Such standards shall also include requiring the installation of a warning sign or symbol as determined by the council on or in the vicinity of such grease trap or interceptors. Such standards shall apply to new and existing grease traps and interceptors, and for the purposes of the subdivision, food service establishment shall have the same meaning as in Part 14 of Title 10 of the New York Code of Rules and Regulations. So I'm not going to steal any more of the thunder for the next agenda item, but this is the basis for why we are going to be asking the Code Council to review and vote on the notice of emergency adoption and proposed rulemaking so that this can go into effect on March 22nd, because the language of the statute also provides that effective immediately, the addition, amendment, and or repeal of any rule or regulation necessary for the implementation of this act on its effective date are authorized to be made and completed on or before such effective date. So that's how you have the authority to do this today. And with that, I will turn it over to John for his update.
Mr. Dario.
Yes. Thank you. Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna. Penioto talked about legislation that's gone into effect. I'm going to talk a little bit about pending legislation, and I'll start with the update on the Climate Action Council plan. They actually have released their draft scoping plan. Most of the stuff we've talked about, there really hasn't been any major changes to that as far as the code, recommendations to the code change, for code. But it is out for public comment. It was made available on January 1st of this year, and it's out for 120 days public comment. So if you haven't had a chance to review that, I would encourage everyone to go to the website and take a look at that. They actually updated it a little bit as far as putting an index so that it's easy to navigate. It's quite a comprehensive document. My suggestion, if you open a PDF, is just do a word search for certain things, because it is quite comprehensive. But anyway, so they are planning at least 6 public hearings across the state within the 120-day period. So I believe that's May 1st is it ends. So I believe they're going to be scheduling those public hearings either virtually or in person before that date. So next, in the state of the state, the governor announced a few items that could potentially impact the Code Council and the codes. The governor announced a plan to achieve 2 million climate-friendly homes by 2030. So it's 2 million climate-friendly electrified or electrification-ready homes by 2030. So I guess part of that, and we were having discussions with the other agencies, Department of State staff, how that's actually going to be implemented. Also, the governor announced that require zero on-site greenhouse gas emissions for new construction, no later than 2027. And then another item was Nyserda to mandate energy benchmarking for large buildings. So again, DOS is part of an interagency group working on how that will all be implemented. And again, this is all nothing. No legislation passed yet. It's things that are being worked on. Also, the governor put forward legislation proposals, somewhat similar to the other stuff that we've seen as far as the Advanced Energy Code, but they looking to incorporate greenhouse gas reduction objectives in developing the new construction code. So expand the scope of the energy code, update the building code cost effectiveness, which is essentially modification to the 10-year payback, in either a life cycle cost analysis and determining the effectiveness of the energy code, and then another portion of that is to expand the co-counsel to include the president of Nyserda and representative from DEC. So again, these are all proposed legislation. Besides these, there's a few others. I won't mention. There are different things that may not directly affect the code, but they may impact the code's division. Things like training and other things that are being proposed. So again, all need to be implemented. You know, how they're going to be implemented, and all that needs to be determined. But I guess regardless, there's a lot of things going on right now, a lot of moving parts, and that need to be worked out and coordinated. So most all these depend on proposed legislation. So I think as far as how that's going to all be implemented, I think we're going to talk a little bit more about it later in the agenda. So the last item I'm going to talk about is the ICC. The ICC hearings are being held in Rochester at the end of this month, I believe March 27th through April 8th. And again, the hearings are for modifications to the 21 codes. So these modifications will be the ones that create the 2024 I codes. The codes division does have several code change proposals that are being heard there. I think there's maybe 8 or 10. And then good news, Kevin actually is sitting on the IEBC committee at the hearing. So I would say if anybody has a chance to go, they're in Rochester. I think it's welcome to anybody can just stop in and just, you know, just watch the hearings. It's interesting. So anyway, so this is the group B. So they'll be hearing the IEBC, the IRC building portion of the code, and the IBC structural. So that's all I have. So, thank you.
Okay, thanks, John. Okay, that closes agenda item number 3, and thank you for the updates, both John and Peniota. I mean, as we can see, the legislature is very focused on enforcement, and I think we all kind of know the reasons for that, and just from news articles. And I think obviously the executive leadership is focused on energy, and that's related to climate change. What it leads to is a very busy code division, you know, with its mandate and training and getting materials ready for us, and a very, very busy council over the next 3 to 5 years, very clearly. Okay, agenda item number 4. Notice of emergency adoption and proposed rulemaking for grease interceptors. This is adding a new part 1229 to 19 NYCRR. Excuse me. Okay, Kevin, you're going to start the presentation here, and then we'll work our way through.
Yep. So the co-council members were provided with a rulemaking package for the notice of emergency proposed rulemaking in reference to the newly signed law that Peniota just went through. The proposed rule text amends Uniform Code by adding new part 1229 to Title 19 of NYCRR and contains specific provisions to address the newly signed law in relation to the installation, modification, use, and maintenance of grease interceptors and grease traps. Tim DeRusha did ask a question for clarity previously, so for the benefit of all the co-council members, this does include all new and existing grease traps and interceptors, inclusive of the small interior below the sink style grease interceptors, as well as the large exterior below grade gravity style, and everything in between. There is an exception for those serving individual dwelling units and satisfying other criteria, such as being installed in accordance with the manufacturer's installation instructions. They are not accessible by the public and are properly maintained and serviced. Many existing grease traps and interceptors installed to a previous version of the Uniform Code would already have been required to withstand expected loads and have a secure cover. So the new regulation would now require the installation of a warning sign and would provide a reminder of the necessary maintenance to keep these devices secure. The new rule also amends section 1219.1 of Title 19 of NYCRR to officially make it part of the Uniform Code. The draft rule was posted on the division's website as a notice of rule in development and was sent to regulated parties via Building New York and e-bulletin hosted by DOS. An email was sent to over 500 waste haulers who are registered with the Department of Environmental Conservation to to haul grease trap waste. As a result of the outreach, the division made some changes to the draft rule text, and those changes are included in the package that the co-council members received, and I'll go over what those changes were now. The chapter law number 47 was inserted into the blank space for the laws of 22, identifying the statutory authority for the rule. In the definition of grease interceptor, reference was made to a gravity grease interceptor being not less than 500 gallons. A comment from a manufacturer of the devices indicated that the standard that regulates these types of interceptors references a minimum volume of 300 gallons. The definition was updated accordingly to better align with the reference standard. The dimensions of the required sign were modified to require a minimum nominal width of 14 inches and a minimum nominal height of 10 inches. This revision was made because there could be sign companies that produce varying dimensions for signs that are off by a half an inch or so, and the division wanted to make sure that it was providing flexibility for the use of those types of signs. Upon further review of chapter 47 of the laws of 2020, signed on February 24th, 2022, it was determined that while requiring existing grease interceptors to comply with the provisions of the rule with the law's effective date of March 22nd, 2022, may be in some instances impracticable, the change in the law does not allow for leeway in compliance or establishment of a grace period. The prior version of the draft rule provided for a 6-month grace period, provided for existing grease traps and interceptors, and a compliance date of September 22nd. However, the rule now requires all grease interceptors or grease traps, both new and existing, to comply with the requirements as of the effective date of March 22nd, 2022. Accordingly, the definitions of new grease trap and new grease interceptor and existing grease interceptor were removed. The division is recommending the co-council adopt the rule as an emergency basis in order to have the rule be in effect as of March 22nd, 2022, as required by the change in the law, and have the division proceed with a notice of proposed rulemaking for the permanent rule. Lastly, based on the timing of the emergency rule and the permanent rule, I'm recommending we move the June 24th co-council meeting to June 17th. This will allow us to file a notice of adoption for the permanent rule and readoption of the emergency rule to bridge the gap between the expiration of a 90-day emergency adoption and the effective date of the permanent rule.
Okay. Thank you, Kevin, for that presentation. Are there questions with regard to the rule for Kevin to answer?
What you read, I understand about the grease traps, totality. Give us a little history. At least I didn't catch it in any of the backup. I may have just been, missed it. But what is the impetus?
So my understanding is there was an event in the Rochester area where a small child fell through the cover of an exterior below grade grease interceptor and subsequently drowned. I guess it's drowning in grease. Several years ago, and so I believe Monroe County passed some laws in order to help prevent this in the future, and subsequently it is now being handled by legislation through the Uniform Code.
How did it get extended to under the sink grease interceptors? I understand the concern there, but it seems you're putting a burden on some small businesses. Has there been a financial impact on business, on existing businesses, small businesses, to comply with this? Who does the inspections? Are they going to be required to submit an annual report to the local code officials? Who makes all the determinations on the exceptions?
Okay, so there were a few different things there. So as far as inspections go, the law itself and the regulation does not require any additional inspections be performed. All buildings are required to undergo a fire safety and property maintenance inspection under the minimum standards for administration and enforcement at varying intervals. Restaurants would likely be under the 1-year interval. So it's up to the authority having jurisdiction to just determine whether they would perform that fire safety and property maintenance inspection at a increased interval to perform an inspection to see that this stuff has been completed, or if they wait until the next cycle when the AHJ is up, or when the building is up for inspection, to perform an inspection of these particular items.
I mean, is there an actual test to see how it operates, like an under the sink grease interceptor? Who would do a test to determine whether it's functioning the way it's according to this law?
Yeah, so I guess,
the local fire inspector is not going to come in and test the grease trap.
Right. I mean, the things that it would have to be checking for are that the sign is in place and that it's secured from unauthorized entry. You know, the interior small type of grease interceptors for withstanding expected loads is a little bit less cumbersome than, you know, the exterior style might be. So I don't necessarily envision that those types, the interior ones, are being tested in that fashion. But the local authority having jurisdiction should be able to validate that the sign's been installed and that it is properly secured.
Are there other questions? Okay, seeing and hearing none, we'll move to a potential motion here. So as we always do, I'll make the motion through Peniota. Well, yes, that's right. She's signaling me that there is two, and there are two, right? So Peniota, if you read the first one, everyone's going to have to bear with us. The first one's relatively short. The second one is a little longer. So Peniota, if you could read the first one, please.
So for your consideration, I move, 1, that the Code Council find and determined that the adoption of the rule identified in Agenda Item 4, Notice of Emergency Adoption and Proposed Rulemaking, Grease Interceptors at Newport 1229 to 19 NYCRR, will not have a significant environmental impact and will not have a significant adverse effect on any significant fish or wildlife habitat, scenic resource of statewide significance, important agricultural land, or area included in an approved local waterfront revitalization program. And 2, that Kevin Dewar Clark PE be authorized to sign and deliver on behalf of the Code Council and the Department of State, A, the State Environmental Quality Review Act Short Environmental Assessment Form indicating that no or small impact may occur in response to each question in Part 2 of that form, and determining in Part 3 of the form that the proposed action will not result in any significant adverse environmental impact. B, the New York State Department of State Coastal Management Program Coastal Assessment Form, and C, the certification of no significant coastal impact. So moved.
Thank you, Peniota. I'm making that motion. May I have a second on that motion? Sean seconds the motion. I also heard Bill there. Is there any discussion on the motion? All right, hearing none. Everyone's shaking their head no. Okay, good. Kevin, will you please call the roll on the motion?
Matt Tebow,
Yes.
Ben Keller,
Yes.
Vincent Rappaciullo,
Yes.
Joseph DeStefano,
No.
Claudia Bramer,
Yes.
Joseph Toomey,
Yes.
Sean Hamlin,
Yes.
Timothy DeRusher,
Yes.
Robert Hughes,
Yes.
William Tyden,
Yes.
Patrick Dolan,
Yes.
Dominic Marinelli.
Yes.
11 to 1.
Okay. The motion carries. All right. Peniota, second motion, please.
For your consideration, I move, 1, that the Code Council find and determine that adoption of the rule identified in Agenda Item 4, Notice of Emergency Adoption and Proposed Rulemaking, Grease Interceptors at Newport 1229 to 19 NYCRR, on an emergency basis and as authorized by Section 2026 of the State Administrative Procedure Act, is necessary to protect public health and safety, and that compliance with the requirements of Subdivision 1 of Section 202 of the State Administrative Procedure Act prior to the adoption of this rule would be contrary to the public interest for the following reasons. A, the New York State Uniform Fire Prevention and Building Code, Uniform Code, which is adopted pursuant to Article 18 of the Executive Law and which is applicable in all parts of the state except New York City, which has its own building code, does not currently have provisions that require every grease trap or interceptor to be designed and maintained to withstand expected loads and to prevent unauthorized access or require the installation of a warning sign or symbol on or in the vicinity of such grease trap or interceptor. B, this rule would amend the Uniform Code to include provisions addressing new subdivision 18 of Executive Law, Section 378, as amended and effective March 22nd, 2022, to include the aforementioned provisions. C, Chapter 753 of the Laws of 2021 and Chapter 47 of the Laws of 2022 provide that the amendments to the new subdivision 18 of Executive Law, Section 378, shall be effective on the 90th day it shall have become law, or March 22nd, 2022, provided, however, that effective immediately the addition, amendment, and/or repeal of any rule or regulation necessary for the implementation of the amendments to Executive Law, Section 378 on its effective date are authorized to be made and completed on or before such effective date. D, a rule amending the Uniform Code to add this new provision is necessary. E, developing, proposing, adopting, and implementing such a rule in compliance with the requirements of State Administrative Act, Section 202, Subdivision 1 would delay the effective date of the rule and be inconsistent with the mandate provided in Chapter 47 of the Laws of 2022. And F, adopting such a rule as an emergency rule to be effective on March 22nd, 2022 is necessary to protect public health, public safety, and general welfare. 2, that the Code Council find and determine that making the adoption of the rule identified in Agenda Item 4, Notice of Emergency Adoption of Proposed Rulemaking, Grease Interceptors, add new Part 1229 to 19 NYCRR, and the amendments to the Uniform Code to be made by that rule effective on March 22nd, 2022, as authorized by Executive Law Section 378, 19AI, is necessary to protect health, safety, and security for the following reasons. A, the Uniform Code, which is adopted pursuant to Article 18 of the Executive Law and which is applicable in all parts of the state except New York City, which has its own building code, does not currently have provisions that require every grease trap or interceptor to be designed and maintained to withstand expected loads and to prevent unauthorized access, or require the installation of a warning sign or symbol on or in the vicinity of such grease trap or interceptor. B, this rule would amend the Uniform Code to include provisions addressing new subdivision 18 of Executive Law, Section 378, as amended and effective March 22nd, 2022, to include the aforementioned provision. C, Chapter 753 of the Laws of 2021 and Chapter 47 of the Laws of 2022 provide that the amendments to the new subdivision 18 of Executive Law, Section 378, shall be effective on the 90th day it shall have become law, or March 22nd, 2022, provided, however, that effective immediately the addition, amendment, and/or repeal of any rule or regulation necessary for the implementation of the amendments to Executive Law, Section 378 on its effective date are authorized to be made and completed on or before such effective date. D, a rule amending the Uniform Code to add this new provision is necessary. E, developing, proposing, adopting, and implementing such a rule to become effective at least 90 days after the date on which notice of such change has been published in the State Register would delay the effective date of the rule and be inconsistent with the mandate provided in Chapter 47 of the Laws of 2022. And F, adopting such a rule as an emergency rule to be effective on March 22nd, 2022 is necessary to protect health, safety, and security. 3, that the rule identified in Agenda Item 4, Notice of Emergency Adoption and Proposed Rulemaking, Grease Interceptors, add new Part 1229 to 19 NYCRR, be adopted as an emergency rule. And 4, that the rule and the amendments to the Uniform Code made by the rule shall be effective on March 22nd, 2022. So moved.
Okay, I'm making that motion, that long motion. That's, all I could think the entire time was that's actually longer than the legislative mandate that was sent to us. Anyway, this is the operative motion. This is the one that creates both the emergency rule that goes into effect on March 22nd, 2022 in conjunction with the statutory mandate to do so, and holds it in effectiveness until the real permanent rule can come into effect in June. This also sets up that real permanent rule. We will still have to adopt that real permanent rule in June, after the appropriate staff period. Okay, now that I've said that, and given Peniota a minute to get some tea and honey, can I have a second to that motion? Joe Toomey seconds the motion. Is there any discussion on the motion? All right, hearing none. Kevin, if you will please call the roll.
Matt Tebow,
I vote yes.
Ben Keller,
Yes.
Vincent Rappaciulo,
Yes.
Joseph DeStefano,
No.
Claudia Bramer,
Yes.
Joseph Toomey,
Yes.
Sean Hamlin,
Yes.
Timothy DeRusher,
Yes.
Robert Hughes,
Yes.
Tim Tyne,
Yes.
Patrick Dolan,
Yes.
Dominic Marinelli,
Yes.
11-1.
Okay, the motion carries. All right, I thank the members for bearing with us as we move through that legislative mandate. Okay, next agenda item, number 5, International Code Council Model Code Review, and I'm kicking to Kevin to start this discussion. Kevin.
Okay. So everyone should have received in their packet, but the division staff prepared the provided document of notable changes based on the 2021 International Model Codes. This includes a high-level look at the red line documents as well as the significant change documents published by Icc. Division staff highlighted items determined to be notable changes specifically for New York State, but staff did not yet analyze every change nor determine whether the division would recommend any one particular change for consideration in New York. The initial exercise was first to establish what the more notable changes are. In addition to performing the review, staff has also been closely monitoring and participating in the proposed changes to the 2024 international codes, of which Group A is complete, and as John mentioned, Group B will begin at the end of this month. John also mentioned I'll be serving on the existing building code committee for this group. The division has prepared multiple proposals to defend at the hearings in Rochester. There are changes being proposed in the 2024 international codes that may aid New York State in satisfying the potential CLCPA goals and the governor's efficiency goals, as well as assisting with complying with any legislation that passes and help to eliminate New York State specific changes that the Code Council currently makes. For example, there is a potential code change for the use of low GWP refrigerants. Improvements were made to the bathroom provisions that enable the safe use of all persons regardless of sex, and a number of proposals submitted by the division have been tentatively approved for Group A. Additionally, for the 2024, the Icc separated the International Energy Conservation Code from the remaining international code books development process, placing it into the Code Council's American National Standards Institute approved standards process, with the anticipation that this will allow for a more in-depth scientific and economic deliberations, a quicker process to meet public and private sector goals, and the development of a broader consensus to support wider application of the adoption. Emma Gonzalez-Ladders from our Energy Code Services Group is a voting consensus committee member for the development of the 2024 IECC and is the chair of the Envelope and Embodied Carbon Subcommittee. Any significant update to the Uniform Code typically takes about 2 years or more to accomplish. At this time, the division would recommend the Code Council does not take any immediate action on updating the Uniform Code or Energy Code until the pending legislation and CLCPA goals have been finalized, as these will likely have a significant impact on the direction of both codes. Additionally, by that time, the 2024 versions of the international codes will be established, which will allow the Code Council to do a single update that can incorporate the 2024 changes, meet CLCPA goals, and comply with any legislation requirements into one single update. Attempting to address these in multiple successive or individual updates would result in years of added time and repetitive work. Waiting will only cause a short delay of 8 to 12 months in the overall update timeline, but would place New York in a position to adopt the 2024 model codes on a more progressive schedule, while also including any new legislative changes and updates that will also allow time to accommodate suggestions from things like the ICC Pandemic Task Force and any ICC recommendations based on the Surfside, Florida building collapse.
Okay, so I asked, after a bunch of pre-meeting discussions leading up to this meeting, I asked staff to obviously look at the 2021 and start to look at the 2024 so that we could at least open up this as a discussion topic for this council. Obviously, they made a recommendation. I myself, as designated chair, am leaning towards the 2024 ICC as the base of our next code. There are many good reasons for that. Obviously, when we looked at the timeframes involved, if we started right now in the 2021, and that would be appropriate, we're sort of at that point where it's time to start to look at the next code. We would be lucky to get it done, at least through the rulemaking process, reviewed and through the rulemaking process by early 2024, and then 6 months after that is when it would be effective, obviously. So that's the 2021. If we jump to the 2024, because we can already see the Group A, we'll soon know what Group B looks like. We can probably have what would be at the time the cutting edge code, and the one that takes away a lot of, as Kevin pointed out, a lot of the New York changes, because they're adopting a lot of where we already are. We could have that in place through the rulemaking process sometime in late 2024, early 2025, and then we have the 6-month period. The point is, we only lose, by my reckoning, about 9 months, and we get to the most cutting edge code in New York. The problem is, we really do have, ICC is moving on a 3-year calendar, and we're moving on closer to a 4-year calendar. And so we're always falling a little bit behind. And that sort of played out, as I think the members saw, in the last code adoption process, right? We were already seeing the 2021 when we were working with the 2018 to get that adopted in 2020, and we were literally pulling pieces out of that 2021 and dropping it into what became New York 2020. So the good news is, a lot of the pieces in the 2021 that were updates from the 18, we've grabbed. So that's good. So that's another reason. But I mean, this is a council of 17. I'm just one, so I'd like to hear from members if they feel strongly that we should consider doing the 2021 in order. If we do, we would likely have the 21 and 24, the 24 by 27 and change, and we would have the 27, probably by 30. So we're losing ground. So, but if people think we need to consider that and staying in order instead of jumping a code and getting ahead, I'd like to hear that. The other issue, of course, and I'll stop talking in a second. The other issue, of course, and I look at Emma to my right, we have energy code changes coming, right? We are likely moving towards New York stretch as the state's energy code in the next go around. That's 2023, 2024 timeframe, and we need to be telling them what to build, Nyserda, what to build that stretch code on. Do they build it on the 24 base, or do they build it on the 21 base? We can't, basically, if we decide to jump, they can't build on the 21 base because there'll be broken linkages, and that will be, Emma shakes her head, that could be highly problematic. So we have to do that as well. And again, Nyserda and the state outside of us are moving to the cutting edge of the energy code adoption as well for climate change reasons. I mean, everything we're hearing out of the UN right now, that seems like an extremely appropriate thing to be doing. And New York does always tend to take the lead on these things with California. So I'll stop talking now. If anybody would like to jump in here, talk about, the plan as I just laid it out, please. Robert?
My opinion, I agree. Trying to get more in line with the ICC would be ideal. I would just hope that as much training and information is provided from code enforcement officials, because of similar to the 9-year jump we had in the last code cycle. Fear of the unknown makes it difficult to understand the jump, what happened, how did something come into play. Not everyone has access, or some colleagues don't even know that the ICC with commentaries is some background to do that, or has the time to do that. That the more training, the better, to really get everyone up to speed, to really comprehend why the change, because you are jumping a code cycle. People that deal with it every day are reviewing it, and in the grind, you may be overlooking the simple that somebody else in the colleague looking at that code for that time on that project doesn't understand why it jumped that far. So I just think that any type of training, and as much as possible, the outreach has been great. I think a lot better than it's been in the past in my history. but as much as possible to the code enforcement officials, they can really comprehend, because I think enforcement happens when they have a good knowledge of why it happened. But I do agree, getting online as much as possible with the current code is always better. Trailing, because what ends up happening is, especially with the standards, they'll be that much farther ahead, and then a lot of the subcontractors and the people in the field might be looking at something, doing something that you can't actually enforce or permit, but meanwhile it might be something that they're used to doing, whether it's the NEC, Nfpa 13, anything for that matter. So I do agree, but that's just something I just wanted to focus on, making sure there's as much training as possible, not just to get your credits, really some classes out there so people can be guided, or Q&A to really ask questions somehow that they can comprehend what happened or what jumped. Maybe it's sometimes the simple things are easy, but capital X, for instance, a term that came into play that a lot of my colleagues were completely unfamiliar with. To this day, still don't comprehend that fully as far as the enforcement of that. That's just one example.
I appreciate your comments, Robert. I really did want to hear from somebody who's on the ground, and I'm glad you jumped in first. That was very helpful for me. I agree with you. Training is always the silver bullet, especially when we're in any jump, right? When we're moving codes, we really need to highlight for the people who are doing this on the ground, what those changes are, and helping them understand how to enforce it. And so I agree with you. Nick McAndrew, who was Kevin before Kevin, sitting to my left, is now the head of that training unit, and he's really hit the ground running. Obviously, the pandemic, it actually had some good things, right? It pushed us into this online training world, and we're exploring. I will tell you, we're exploring that even further. And how to deliver and test in a way that we know that material is getting across. So, thank you for those comments. I appreciate it. Anybody else?
Chairman, this is Ben Keller.
Hey, Ben, fire away.
I agree with Robert as well. There's a lot of tools that are coming in the newer versions of the code to assist the fire service in dealing with the energy storage and other changes that the energy code is bringing on us as the fire service. Technology is accelerating at a pace where we cannot keep up with response to all those incidents. For example, electric vehicles we're struggling with right now, and there are some things in development and changes from Nfpa that will certainly benefit the fire service in the long run. So I agree as well with Robert, and the additional training is critical. And I guess my question is, if we go to the 24 code, is the intent at that point to try to keep up with the Icc cycle?
That would be my intent, Ben, because we would be finishing more or less on time, right? We will start to see the actual language next summer, right, from Icc. So we would literally be adopting it as fast as we can following their cycle. So their 2024, we would be very close to 2024, 2025. And from there, we would have to turn around and launch into the 2027 pretty much right away. So, basically, from where I'm sitting, staff can handle the cycle that I'm throwing out right now. They can handle the 2024 by 2025 and the 27 sometime in late 27 if we start now. That's a hard slog, but that's I think what we have to try and do from here forward, because we want to stay at that cutting edge. Trying to do 21, 24, 27 and try and keep anywhere in that, it becomes very difficult to do it. So that's the best answer I can give you, is we would be turning around almost immediately in the 27 to try and stay cutting edge. Tim?
So I understand the need to go to the latest. I just have a question relative to how we go through the process and the timing that it takes. There's an awful lot of work that the staff does that brings to us to take a look at. It's whittled down all the information, so it's not a lot of evaluation by ourselves, and that's appreciated. But accepting the administrative provisions in the codes and the other legally required specifics, such as local law or a state law that says something about grease traps. Accepting those two items on laws and administrative provisions, why does the process for us reviewing the ICC updated versions of the codes take 18 to 24 months or the time period rather than having that condensed down? And I think a lot of that relates to concepts that have been thrown out to stay with the language of the ICC in its entirety versus having a lot of individual changes or having home rule changes, which I still am in favor of. But I don't think we completely understand why we're taking such a long time. And is it the process that we could change to make it easier for us and for the staff and everybody else? Because I know other states, I know it's not New York, I know other states do it quite readily, and just trying to understand what it is that we have to deal with.
Sure.
And that might be something not for the council meeting, but a document that says this is what we have to do and this is why we have to do it in a summary form.
Okay, so working backwards through your question, I agree. That's a great thing to provide to the council. So Kevin, we're going to provide a sort of a detailed view of how code adoption works through your staff in the process. To move backwards through your question a little bit, I'm going to say I'll take a piece of this, and I think I'll ask Kevin to take a piece of this. We have in New York, we have SAPA, and the way we interpret SAPA, and we continue to look at that. Penny is going to frown at me, but we continue to look at this. The way we interpret SAPA, we basically have an 18-month process, 12 to 18-month process right there, because we have to go through this cycle of notice of rule and development, which gets us commentary that meets a piece of SAPA, I'm told, and then we have to go through the notice of proposed rulemaking. There's a public comment period with both of those. There's hearings involved, and then there's obviously we only meet 4 times a year, so we've got to sort of line that up. So unfortunately, or fortunately, I mean, public comment is really important in this process. This is basically creating a whole, another set of laws, right? I mean, I always say that when they stack up the books on my desk in the old days, I used to say, oh, great, we have another McKinney's. But it is a very time-consuming process. So the only place we can really shorten is the guy to my left is in charge of that process, and that's the staff review up through and into that process. That's actually a staff review and it's called council review, right? Because it doesn't go out until we all see it and we all are comfortable with it. So, I mean, Kevin, you want to just sort of take a moment and run through that? But like I said, I agree, Tim, we probably should set this out to the members in a little more detail than I'm providing right now.
It just seems it's a lot easier to go through, hey, guess what, we're going to do a new stretch code. That seems to go a lot smoother and a lot faster than what we're dealing with the building code, fire code, et cetera. Just doesn't seem the same.
Yeah, so I mean, for example, with the new stretch code with Nyserda, they don't have to go through the SAPA process in order to develop a new stretch code. They can develop the stretch code, publish it on their website, and then recommend to municipalities, go ahead and adopt this. And the municipalities handle it at their local level for the adoption. So that's why that type of code, or that type of overlay can happen faster. And to speak to Matt's SAPA process, for example, with grease traps, that took, started around October timeframe. By the time we get to the next meeting, and the final adoption is going to be July, and that's one statutory provision and one seemingly small change.
Sorry, Kevin, to jump in, with an extremely short rule and development period, right? We only put that out there because of the process to try and get to this day, and therefore the June day. We really only put that out there for 10.
It was like 10 days, I think.
Which I mean, is as short as I would ever be comfortable going on a small thing. Never mind a gigantic.
Yeah. Understand that there's procedures that need to be followed. I'm not asking that, but it seems there's got to be a better way.
Yeah. So you add that SAPA piece.
Oh, okay,
Sorry.
John. Hi.
I just want to, I'm sorry, just one thing. I know in the past, years ago, the code council tried to shorten the process, and we thought we were going to come out with a supplement, and we thought that would that would do it, and we make the modification separate than the code. I'll be perfectly honest. I got a lot of complaints about that, about having that separate document. I mean, the end product that was better was to have changes all incorporated in the codes. So that adds to the process as well. I don't know if it really shortened the total length of time having the supplement, but there is a length of time that we have to work with ICC to get all those changes incorporated. Okay. I think that, in my opinion, is a much better product, but I don't know if it really bought us that much time. But that's, so we have to consider the ICC process of updating the code. I mean, if we weren't making any changes at all and just adopting the straight I code, I think that would, but I don't see that. I mean, I know at one point the code council made a decision to try to eliminate as many changes as we could, and we did. Staff went through that, and we tried to do that. But the only thing I see coming in the future are more changes to the I codes. So that adds a little bit to the time frame because we have to work with ICC to get those changes incorporated.
So, give me a second. So I mean, basically, we have a process that currently we have 200 real New York changes. Every one of those has to be reviewed in order to make sure there are no broken linkages, right? There's a lot of this work that this is why I actually think, Tim, that I gain some efficiency by jumping to the 24 because a lot of those New York changes disappear. So that's where I'm starting to think that it's the other half of my work life is actually finding efficiencies. And this is one of the things I've been looking at for a while, is how we can get through this process on the staff side quicker. I will tell you that when we get deep into that code review and when the books, and now it's the endpoints on the computer get delivered, it's basically John's entire staff that reviews.
I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, but I mean, we're also, we're able to, thanks to Governor Hochul, we are able to staff up, right now, we are, so that we have more bodies. Hopefully that moves that along in a quicker manner. Robert, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that I would imagine getting closer to the ICC, those changes being so close to their changes should be a little bit more efficient on the end of the prepare and review, as opposed to 6, 7, 8, or 9 years trying to establish that change. I mean, that what I was also thinking as far as the closer you get to the ICC, not to disregard that there could be significant changes coming, and no disregard to the amount of work that you guys do. But I would hope that if you get closer to that code cycle in the future, because it took a while just to get to this point, that I think it should be more efficient on that end. I would hope that then it's just now the process of going through the public review. Hopefully it starts to condense it a little bit more so we don't have another issue where we become 5, 6, 7 years behind. That would defeat the purpose.
That's my fear, right? I not only have 12 plus years left in my career, I do not want us, when we get to that point, to be so far behind that, that's what destroyed us in 2015, right? That's why the jump from 2006 to 2015, when we decided to undertake that was, I mean, really a full 3 or 4 or even 5-year process to try and catch us up, because there was so much work to do and there were so many New York changes involved at that point. We had just accumulated too much. Okay, anybody else?
Just
Joe?
Yes. Bill Payne. Mr. Chairman.
Bill, let me go with Joe. Joe had started, and then I'll come to you. Joe?
Okay, well, I agree, Joe, go to 24. And going with Tim is, obviously, New York State red tape. And if you look at the efficiencies, it's not, I mean, your staff does a great job. Do we look above you to see what efficiencies we can try and push to eliminate some of the red tape on you and your staff?
Well, I mean, what you're talking about is legislative changes, right? I mean, because the only way to shorten that SAPA period is for the legislature to tell us to shorten. I mean, I will tell you, obviously we're in an open meeting, so this is not confidentially, but I'll tell you that we looked at the rule and development process, which is a Department of State construct in this area. to see if we can do that in a different way that still meets those SAPA requirements. That maybe, I mean, that is a robust. That is basically doing a second rulemaking process, right? I mean, notice of proposed through notice of adoption. That's a 6-month process, and then we're loading up with a 6-month process. So if we could shorten that, now maybe that only requires a small tweak to a statute to make it so we can meet that in a little bit different way. But yes. I see where you're going, Joe.
It's not you, it's,
no,
you're being told.
Right.
There's a public consensus process through the ICC, and then we have to go through the whole SAPA thing and the public consensus and review all over again.
Right.
So it just seems like we're doing a whole lot of extra things, and makes it very difficult to make things move ahead.
Understood. I'm sorry, Bill. Fire away.
Thank you. I'm going to drag it backwards a little bit because there's been so much conversation, and I'm going to try not to forget my original question. I'll take my hand down, which has been up for quite a while. I think that, first of all, I think the staff needs to be commended. I don't know that there's enough appreciation for just how massive an undertaking it is to review all these codes every single cycle and put it in front of us with recommendations on which direction to go. This is no simple task. And you referenced a little while ago the jump from 2006 to 2015. And if you remember, I mean, the effort to streamline that process included abandoning the effort to adopt the 2012 cycle and to go forward with 15 by eliminating subcommittee review of the codes and go straight to the Code Council with the full code to review. So a lot of effort's been put. This has been a thought process to how to tweak this massive undertaking and try to streamline it in a process that is, in my view, incredibly difficult to streamline because it's such a huge task. So I think everyone should be commended on the effort that it took just to go from 15 to 18 and get that adopted. And then through COVID, we find ourselves a little bit behind on 21, but we're behind on 21. So the idea that we're going to go expeditiously forward, adopt 21, and then move on to 24, to me, is absurd. I think the proper move is just what's been put on the table to move to 24. Now, my only question in that regard is, because people are involved in code development, obviously ICC's well done with 2021 code development, but the 2024 cycle code development has begun. So does staff have any kind of sense of how different, with the exception of energy code, which you know my feelings on the energy code's ability to not be uniform and how much I really am unhappy with that effort. But negating that, the idea, how significantly different is 24 with the uniform code from 21 anyway? Is it really that big a loss to us to jump to 24 and skip over 21?
I mean, I would say at a first glance, I don't see it as a huge concern to skip over 21 and jump to 24. I think that 24 is, like I said, has some benefits for some of the pending legislation that's coming through that may actually help us. So, kind of pushing to that time frame, I think, is overall help all of this come together in one single update in a faster time frame in the end. So
I kind of expected that answer. And so the other element I think that we should talk about at some point, which is a little different, but it goes back to energy, is this sort of legislative initiative to push new construction to be fully electrified 100% by 2027, all of these elements, and it seems to be in complete disregard to the capacity of the grid to actually supply capacity for those kind of code changes that potentially will find their way from legislation into the code. And I have deep trouble with that and concern. So it's not that I think we shouldn't move in this direction, but it seems to be really foolish to mandate something that can't be complied with and shut down an entire industry, which has so much of an impact on the entire economy. I've said it many times, there's a reason why. When you look at the health of the economy, the fundamental benchmark cited as housing starts. And I can tell you right now, it is quite often difficult to get service to new developments already with the existing grid when you're not 100% electrified. So there really needs to be a hard look at the technical elements of this. I know it's mom and apple pie to say, let's just do it. But the boots on the ground element, it really needs a hard look. And so adopt, move to the 2024. I have no issues with that, and I think that makes sense. I don't think it's going to be particularly problematic, and it puts us back on track to stay current with each cycle. That's good, and we're not falling that far behind if it's not that significant, but taking on these energy issues, we really need to take an extremely hard look at some of the things that are coming down the road. I get the importance, I understand it, but we really need to look at the technical limitations of what's being asked. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. I will note that, there's already a pretty decent sized working group that's meeting weekly. And I love these meetings, that is involving Nyserda, DPS, right, and DEC and the housing agency, and HCR, the housing agency, that is looking at some of those questions that you just provided. I myself, when I first saw the electrification by 2027, that was a thought that I had as well. Bill, can the grid even handle that at this point? So, and if so, if it can't right now, or if it's close, what's the build out and the timeframes involved there? So there is a lot of, I'll call them very smart people who do this for a living that are looking at those issues already. And obviously this is going to be a long process to get to that 2027 goal, and obviously the capacity has to be in place for that to happen. Did I summarize that well? Okay, all right. I should have looked at you, sorry.
Kevin's actually part of the participate.
Okay, are there any other points, questions, etc.? Okay. All right, I think we're gonna be moving forward, looking at the Group A stuff in 2024, and I think the council is gonna start to see a regular cadence about that, what the jump will look like from New York 2020 to ICC 24, which I am going to hope would become New York 25, I think, because of the 6 months it's going to be New York 25, right? So let's move to the next agenda item. Unfortunately, we spoke so long that my my screen has reset here. All right. Agenda item number 6. We are on to more restrictive energy code filings under Energy Law Section 11-109. These are almost entirely stretch code, right?
Almost. Yes.
Almost entirely stretch code. All right, so we're entering that thing where we talk. Emma's going to give a presentation about a specific municipality's local law. We'll have an opportunity to ask any questions about it, when we will vote to approve or deny, and then move to the next one. Hopefully we can get into a groove here, because these are difficult. All right. So
This is the fun part.
This is Emma's fun part. Okay, Emma, Town of New Salem, please.
Actually, before I get to that, as you have seen in the past, a very common trend amongst municipalities adopting New York Stretch as a supplement to the state energy code is to sever a provision in section R403.6.2 that requires residential occupancies to be equipped with either an ERV, stands for energy recovery ventilator, or an HRV, which is a heat recovery ventilator. Chris Groy from Nyserda spoke at the December 3rd meeting, indicating that a community adopting New York Stretch and severing that provision still yields a local energy code that is more stringent than the state energy code. I just want to lay that out as background, and you'll see why. So 3 towns, the towns of North Salem, Humphrey, and Orangetown, adopted New York Stretch and severed that provision. Their local laws were filed with the division within 30 days of adoption, and they are based on based on Nyserda's assessment that Stretch is still more restrictive than the state code, even when that provision is severed. The division is prepared to recommend that the council find that the local energy codes adopted by the towns of North Salem, Humphrey, and Orangetown are more restrictive than the state energy code.
Okay. Thank you, Emma. All right, Emma, you ready? Town of New Salem? One more point?
I think we're ready to go to the motions, and that's back to Paniota.
Okay. Well, actually,
So we went through
Did North Salem,
these three
Humphrey,
together,
and North
right?
Salem
We
together.
made the recommendation, so.
okay, so then let's do this. Does anyone have any questions on those three? Sorry, I lost my spot for a second, I'll admit it. Does anyone have any questions on those three before we move to motions? All right, the council received all of this in their packets, so hopefully everybody's comfortable with where we're going. All right, Paniota, if you'll read the motion on Town of New Salem, please, that I will be making through you.
For the Town of North Salem, on September 14th, 2021, the Town of North Salem, the town, adopted Local Law Number 4 of 2021, which amended the Town of North Salem's code, the town code, to adopt the New York Stretch Energy Code 2020, New York Stretch. The local law was filed with the Department of State's Records Unit pursuant to Municipal Home Rule Law on September 20th, 2021. On September 30th, 2021, less than 30 days after the adoption of Local Law Number 4 of 2021, the town filed a copy of Local Law Number 4 of 2021 with the Department of State for the Code Council's review pursuant to Subdivision 2 of Section 11-109 of the Energy Law. On November 23rd, 2021, the town rescinded Local Law Number 4 of 2021. On February 8th, 2022, the town adopted Local Law Number 1 of 2022, which amended Town Code to adopt New York Stretch except for Section R403.6.2 of New York Stretch regarding mechanical ventilation requirements. The local law has not been filed with the Department of State Records Unit pursuant to the Municipal Home Rule Law. On February 16th, 2022, less than 30 days after the adoption of Local Law Number 1 of 2022, the town filed a copy of Local Law Number 1 of 2022 with the Department of State for the Code Council's review pursuant to Subdivision 2 of Section 11-109 of the Energy Law. On July 10th, 2020 and September 16th, 2021, Nyserda presented to the Code Council a report indicating that New York Stretch Energy Code 2020 version 1.0, which modifies certain provisions of the 2018 International Energy Conservation Construction Code and ASHRAE Standard 90.1-2016, is more restrictive than the currently effective version of the State Energy Code. On December 3rd, 2021, Nyserda presented to the Code Council a report indicating New York Stretch Energy Code 2020 version 1.0 with Section 403.6.2 removed is still more restrictive than the currently effective version of the State Energy Code. The Town of North Salem's Local Energy Conservation Construction Code, as amended by Local Law Number 1 of 2022, adopts New York Stretch by providing that the State Energy Code shall be modified in the manner as contemplated by New York Stretch, except for Section R403.6.2, which is added to the 2018 IECC by Section 3.11 of New York Stretch, shall not be deemed to be added to the 2020 ECCC NYS. I move that the Code Council determine pursuant to Subdivision 2 of Section 11-109 of the Energy Law that the Town of North Salem's Local Energy Conservation Construction Code, as amended by Local Law Number 1 of 2022, is more restrictive than the currently effective version of the State Energy Code. The Code Council makes no finding or determination regarding any provision in the Town of North Salem's Local Energy Code that may be a local standard for construction within the meaning of Section 379 of the Executive Law, and nothing herein should be construed as the Code Council's approval or adoption of any such local standard for construction. In addition, the town's local law shall not be effective until the local law is filed with the State Records Unit pursuant to the Municipal Home Rule Law. So moved.
Thank you, Paniota. I would note that you have changed the spacing on this and gone to lowercase in order to make it look shorter for me. So I appreciate that, I guess. May I have a second for that motion? Joe Toomey seconds the motion. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Kevin, please call the roll for North Salem.
Matt Tebow,
Yes.
Ben Keller,
Yes.
Vincent Rappaciulo,
Yes.
Joseph DeStefano,
Yes.
Claudia Bramer,
Yes.
Joseph Toomey,
Yes.
Sean Hamlin,
Yes.
Timothy DeRusher,
Yes.
Robert Hughes,
Yes.
William Tyne,
Yes, yes.
Patrick Dolan,
Yes.
Dominic Marinelli.
Yes.
All right, unanimous.
Motion carries. Kevin, please notify the community involved. All right, Town of Humphrey. That's fine.
9.
Well, no, we have to go through.
We still
Oh,
have,
sorry, my
we still
bad.
have to do Humphrey in Orangetown.
Jumping ahead.
See, you got lost too. All right, I feel better now about my mistake earlier. Okay. Town of Humphrey. We've already asked if anybody has any questions. I'll throw it out there again. Hearing none. Peniota, can you please read that motion?
Indeed.
Just slightly short.
On November 8th, 2021, the Town of Humphrey, the town, adopted Local Law Number 5 of 2021, which amended the Town of Humphrey Code, the Town Code, to adopt New York Stretch Energy Code 2020, except for Section R403.6.2 of New York Stretch regarding mechanical ventilation requirement. The local law has not been filed with the Department of State Records Unit pursuant to Municipal Home Rule Law. On December 6, 2021, less than 30 days after the adoption of Local Law Number 5 of 2021, the town filed a copy of Local Law Number 5 of 2021 with the Department of State for the Code Council's review pursuant to Subdivision 2 of Section 11-109 of the Energy Law. On July 10, 2020 and September 16, 2021, Nyserda presented to the Code Council a report indicating that New York Stretch Energy Code 2020 version 1.0, which modifies certain provisions of the 2018 International Energy Conservation Construction Code and ASHRAE Standard 90.1-2016, is more restrictive than the currently effective version of the State Energy Code. On December 3, 2021, Nyserda presented to the Code Council a report indicating New York Stretch Energy Code 2020 version 1.0, with Section 403.6.2 removed, is still more restrictive than the currently effective version of the State Energy Code. The Town of Humphrey's Local Energy Conservation Construction Code, as amended by Local Law Number 5 of 2021, adopts New York Stretch as a supplement to the 2020 ECCC NYS, provided, however, that Section R403.6.2 of New York Stretch regarding mechanical ventilation requirements is severed and not adopted, and Section M1505.4.1 is retained. I move that the Code Council determine, pursuant to Subdivision 2 of Section 11-109 of the Energy Law, that the Town of Humphrey's Local Energy Conservation Construction Code, as amended by Local Law Number 5 of 2021, is more restrictive than the currently effective version of the State Energy Code. The Code Council makes no finding or determination regarding any provision in the Town of Humphrey's Local Energy Code that may be a local standard for construction within the meaning of Section 379 of the Executive Law, and nothing herein should be construed as the Code Council's approval or adoption of any such local standard for construction. In addition, the town's local law shall not be effective until the local law is filed with the State Records Unit pursuant to the Municipal Home Rule Law. So moved.
Thank you, Peniota. Can I have a second for that motion? Oh, we are quiet today, aren't we? We'll take Robert on that one. Robert seconds. Are there any questions or comments on the motion? Hearing none, Kevin, please call the roll.
Matt Tebow,
Yes.
Ben Keller,
Yes.
Vincent Rappaciulo,
Yes.
Joseph DeStefano,
Yes.
Claudia Bramer,
Yes.
Joseph Toomey,
Yes.
Sean Hamlin,
Yes.
Timothy DeRusher,
Yes.
Robert Hughes,
Yes.
William Tyne,
Yes.
Patrick Dolan,
Yes.
and Dominic Marinelli.
Yes.
All right, unanimous.
Okay, that is passed unanimously. If you could let the Town of Humphrey know, Kevin, and we will move to now the Town of Orangetown. 2 down, number 3. Peniota, can you read the motion?
I can. On November 30th, 2021, the Town of Orangetown, the town, adopted Local Law Number 8 of 2021, which amended the Town of Orangetown Code, the Town Code, to adopt New York Stretch Energy Code 2020, except for Section R403.6.2 of New York Stretch regarding mechanical ventilation requirements. The local law was filed with the Department of State Records Unit pursuant to the Municipal Home Rule Law on December 9th, 2021. On December 20th, 2021, less than 30 days after the adoption of Local Law Number 8 of 2021, the town filed a copy of Local Law Number 8 of 2021 with the Department of State for the Code Council's review pursuant to Subdivision 2 of Section 11-109 of the Energy Law. On July 10th, 2020 and September 16th, 2021, Nyserda presented to the Code Council a report indicating that New York Stretch Energy Code 2020 version 1.0, which modifies certain provisions of the 2018 International Energy Conservation Code and ASHRAE Standard 90.1 2016, is more restrictive than the currently effective version of the State Energy Code. On December 3rd, 2021, Nyserda presented to the Code Council a report indicating New York Stretch Energy Code 2020 version 1.0, the section 403.6.2 removed, is still more restrictive than the currently effective version of the State Energy Code. The Town of Orangetown's Local Energy Conservation Construction Code, as amended by Local Law Number 8 of 2021, adopts New York Stretch by providing that the State Energy Code shall be modified in the manner as contemplated by New York Stretch, except for section R403.6.2, which is added to the 2018 IECC by section 3.11 of New York Stretch, shall not be deemed to be added to the 2020 ECCC NYS. I move that the Code Council determine, pursuant to subdivision 2 of section 11-109 of the Energy Law, that the Town of Orangetown's Local Energy Conservation Construction Code, as amended by Local Law Number 8 of 2021, is more restrictive than the currently effective version of the State Energy Code. The Code Council makes no finding or determination regarding any provision in the Town of Orangetown's Local Energy Code that may be a local standard for construction within the meaning of Section 379 of the Executive Law, and nothing herein shall be construed as the Code Council's approval or adoption of any such local standard for construction. So moved.
Thank you, Paniota. Can I have a second of that motion? Joe Toomey seconds the motion. Come on, folks. Come on. Joe Toomey seconds the motion. Is there any questions, comments on the motion? Hearing none. Kevin, please call the roll.
Matt Tebow,
Yes.
Ben Keller,
Yes.
Vincent Rappaciulo,
Yes.
Joseph DeStefano,
Yes.
Claudia Bramer,
Yes.
Joseph Toomey,
Yes.
Sean Hamlin,
Yes.
Timothy DeRusher,
Yes.
Robert Hughes,
Yes.
William Tyne,
Yes.
Patrick Dolan,
Yes.
Dominic Marinelli.
Yes.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. Kevin, please let the Town of Orangetown know of the results. Okay, now Village of Lima is a little different, so we jump back to Emma to brief us. Emma.
Very good. So the Village of Lima adopted New York Stretch, also severed the mechanical ventilation provision, submitted the filing within 30 days of adoption. However, the language of the local law indicates that the code official shall, and I'm quoting, administer and enforce New York Stretch and any updates thereto. The council has previously found similar adoptions to be more restricted than the state code, filed within the required 30 days and therefore enforceable. However, the division recommends, consistent with previous determinations, memorializing in a motion the specific version of New York Stretch that these two findings are based on. Currently, only version 1 of New York Stretch is available. And that no findings be made regarding future versions of the standard that has not yet been published. Any questions?
Any questions on the difference here? It's just that little piece there that hung us up.
So they just were trying to cover for if there are extra versions, additional versions that come out. That was probably their intent.
Probably yes, but the problem is that we haven't seen
The
them.
raw number. And
So
I
how
wouldn't
can
want to
we-
have something that the unknown.
I actually don't think this council has the authority to look at something that doesn't exist yet. Though I'm pretty sure Nyserda is telling communities as they're doing this that there will be a version 2 and potentially a version 3, though that I think they hope would be something we would be adopting statewide. That's, I think, what they're telling us, so that's why this showed up as language. Any other questions? Okay, I can see Paniota already releasing the mute on our computer. Paniota, I am advised that it is the Village of Lima, so I apologize to the citizens. I said it wrong. My phonetics failed me there. I should have known the A made the I hard. Please, Paniota.
I would never make such a mistake. On November 23rd, 2021, the Village of Lima, the Village, adopted Local Law Number 3 of 2021, which amended the Village of Lima Village Code, the Village Code, to adopt New York Stretch Energy Code 2020, except for Section R403.6.2 of New York Stretch regarding mechanical ventilation requirements. On December 7th, 2021, Less than 30 days after the adoption of Local Law Number 3 of 2021, the village filed a copy of Local Law Number 3 of 2021 with the Department of State for the Code Council's review pursuant to Subdivision 2 of Section 11-109 of the Energy Law. However, Local Law Number 3 of 2021, adopted by the village on May 11th, 2021, and filed with the Department of State State Records Unit on May 27th, 2021, pursuant to the Municipal Home Rule Law, relates to amending Chapter 185, Article 13 of the Code of the Village of Lima pertaining to signage. The Local Law Number 3 of 2021 submitted to the Department for the Code Council's review pursuant to Subdivision 2 of Section 11-109 of the Energy Law on December 7th, 2021, was not filed with the Department of State State Records Unit pursuant to the Municipal Home Rule Law. On July 10th, 2020 and September 16th, 2021, Nyserda presented to the Code Council a report indicating that New York Stretch Energy Code 2020 version 1.0, which modifies certain provisions of the 2018 International Energy Conservation Code and ASHRAE's Standard 90.1 2016, is more restrictive than the currently effective version of the State Energy Code. On December 3rd, 2021, Nyserda presented to the Code Council a report indicating New York Stretch Energy Code 2020 version 1.0, with Section 403.6.2 removed, is still more restrictive than the currently effective version of the State Energy Code. The Village of Lima's Local Energy Conservation Construction Code, as amended by Local Law Number 3 of 2021, as submitted to the Department on December 7th, 2021, adopts New York Stretch and any updates thereto as a supplement to the 2020 ECCC NYS, except for Section R403.6.2, Balance and HRV-ERV Systems Mandatory, which is not being adopted and shall not be enforced. I move that the Code Council determine, pursuant to Subdivision 2 of Section 11-109 of the Energy Law, that the Village of Lima's Local Energy Conservation Construction Code, as amended by Local Law Number 3 of 2021, as submitted to the Department on December 7th, 2021, is more restrictive than the currently effective version of the State Energy Code. The determination is limited to version 1.0 of New York Stretch, and the Code Council makes no finding or determination regarding any subsequent updates to New York Stretch. In the event that the Village of Lima would like to amend the Village's Local Energy Code to include future updates to New York Stretch, then such amendments would need to be filed with the Code Council in accordance with Subdivision 2 of Section 11-109 of the Energy Law. The Code Council makes no finding or determination regarding any provision in the Village of Lima's Local Energy Code that may be a local standard for construction within the meaning of Section 379 of the Executive Law, and nothing herein should be construed as the Code Council's approval or adoption of any such local standard for construction. In addition, the Village's local law shall not be effective until the local law is filed with the State Records Unit pursuant to the Municipal Home Rule Law. In the event that the Village files the local law with the State Records Unit, and it is assigned a new local law number for 2022, the Code Council's determination with respect to the substance of the local law pursuant to Energy Law Section 11-109 remains unchanged. So moved.
Thank you, Peniota. May I have a second of that motion?
Second.
Second.
Hey,
We heard you.
I appreciate it, guys. Ladies. Joe was first, so Joe seconds the motion. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Just to be clear, so will the municipality be notified to not have that language as far as current versions if it is approved by the Code Council?
So I think I should probably defer to council here because my answer would be that they cannot enforce. They could not enforce it if they got to if they adopt the next stretch. They would still have to come back to us. Am I right about that, Peniota? Under this motion and decision.
Correct. So we are approving their adoption of version 1.0. So if they would like to enforce a future version, they would have to come back to the Code Council and file an amended local law.
I understand. My question was just specifically, would we notify them that that language actually shouldn't be in their local law?
I mean, they will get a copy of the motion that'll basically outline the fact that that version is what's being approved. I don't know that we would tell them remove that piece. It's just that this is what they are approved
that
for.
part of that would be still in their local law.
It would remain, but it would be unenforceable, right? I mean,
I'm clear on what we would be approving if we approved it.
okay. I mean, Kevin, since we're going to notify them of the decision, we can probably highlight for them.
We can emphasize the fact that it's only to this version is what the motion was made based on, so it's abundantly clear.
Are there any other questions on the motion? Okay, hearing none. Kevin?
Matt Tebow,
Yes.
Ben Keller,
Yes.
Vincent Rappaciullo,
Yes.
Joseph DeStefano,
Yes.
Claudia Bremer,
Yes.
Joseph Toomey,
Yes.
Sean Hamlin,
Yes.
Timothy DeRusher,
Yes.
Robert Hughes,
Yes.
William Tyne,
Yes.
Patrick Dolan,
Yes.
Dominic Marinelli.
Yes.
Unanimous.
Motion carries unanimously. And Kevin, please let them know based on our discussion just now. Okay, next one, Town of Esopus, and I would now given the phonetic spelling so I get it correct. Go ahead, Emma.
The Town of Esopus amended their town code on December 16th of 2021 and filed a copy of the local law with the Division of Building Standards and Codes on February 24th of 2022, which is more than 30 days from adoption and therefore not enforceable until and unless the Code Council determines it to be more restrictive than the State Energy Code. The local law adopts New York Stretch as a supplement to the State Energy Code without any modifications. Based on Nyserda's presentations, the Council has previously found similar adoptions to be more restrictive than the State Energy Code. Accordingly, the Division recommends, consistent with previous determinations, that the Code Council find that the local energy code adopted by the Town of Esopus to be more restrictive than the State Energy Code.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for the Town of Esopus? Okay. Hearing none, we're on to Peniota to make the motion. Peniota?
On December 16th, 2021, the Town of Esopus, the town, adopted local law number 14 of 2021, which amended the Town of Esopus Code, the town code, to adopt the New York Stretch Energy Code 2020, New York Stretch. The local law was filed with the Department of State Records Unit pursuant to Municipal Home Rule Law on December 24th, 2021. On February 24th, 2022, more than 30 days after the adoption of local law number 14 of 2021, the town filed a copy of local law number 14 of 2021 with the Department of State for the Code Council's review pursuant to subdivision 2 of section 11-109 of the Energy Law. On July 10th, 2020 and September 16th, 2021, Nyserda presented to the Code Council a report indicating that New York Stretch Energy Code 2020 version 1.0, which modifies certain provisions of the 2018 International Energy Conservation Code and ASHRAE Standard 90.1 2016, is more restrictive than the currently effective version of the State Energy Code. On December 3rd, 2021, Nyserda presented to the Code Council a report indicating New York Stretch Energy Code 2020 version 1.0, with section 403.6.2 removed, is still more restrictive than the currently effective version of the State Energy Code. The Town of Esopus' Local Energy Conservation Construction Code, as amended by Local Law Number 14 of 2021, adopts New York Stretch as a supplement to the State Energy Code. I move that the Code Council determine, pursuant to Subdivision 2 of Section 11-109 of the Energy Law, that the Town of Esopus' Local Energy Conservation Construction Code, as amended by Local Law Number 14 of 2021, is more restrictive than the currently effective version of the State Energy Code. The Code Council makes no finding or determination regarding any provision in the Town of Esopus' Local Energy Code that may be a local standard for construction within the meaning of Section 379 of the Executive Law, and nothing herein shall be construed as the Code Council's approval or adoption of any such local standard for construction. So moved.
Thank you, Peniota. Once again, I'm going to put on the record that I'm making these motions. Peniota's just reading them. I just want that on the record because I realized I hadn't said it in a little bit. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Sean got me first, so Sean Hamlin is the second on that. Are there any questions or comments on the motion? Hearing none. Kevin, call the roll, please.
Matt Tebow,
Yes.
Ben Keller,
Yes.
Vincent Rappaciullo,
Yes.
Joseph DeStefano,
Yes.
Claudia Bremer,
Yes.
Joseph Toomey,
Yes.
Sean Hamlin,
Yes.
Timothy DeRusher,
Yes.
Robert Hughes,
Yes.
William Tyne,
Yes. Yes.
Patrick Dolan,
Yes.
Dominic Marinelli.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. Kevin, please notify the Town of Esopus of the decision of the council. Okay, 5 down, 2 to go in the energy realm. So the next one is the Town of Southampton. And this one does have some differences. So Emma, please.
So the town of Southampton adopted New York Stretch as a supplement to the state energy code. The local law was filed within 30 days of adoption. It serves the ERV or HRV provision mentioned earlier. It also imposes other requirements, such as dwellings to be rated and verified by a home energy rating system rater or HERS rater or equivalent, an energy rating index of either 50 or 35, depending on the size of the dwelling, where the state energy code requires a maximum of 62 for the same climate zone, and in this case, the lower the number, the better, the more restrictive. Adoption of New York Stretch Appendices CB, which is rated R value of insulation for commercial buildings, and CC, which is additional power distribution systems. The local law also provides a mechanism for a waiver from the ERI rating for structures that meet the local law's definition of historic significance. The division recommends that the Code Council find the local energy code adopted by the town of Southampton to be more restrictive than the state energy code. It is filed within 30 days, therefore it is enforceable. As it pertains to waivers, the division recommends that the Code Council indicate in its findings that such waivers may apply only to the provisions of the local law that are found to be more restrictive than the state energy code, and that in no event should such waiver modify a provision of the state energy code other than through a variance application to the Department of State.
Okay, are there any questions for Emma regarding Southampton? Okay, hearing none. Peniota, if you could read my motion here.
Find the mute. On December 14th, 2021, the town of Southampton, the town, adopted local law number 25 of 2021, which amended the town of Southampton code, the town code, to adopt New York Stretch Energy Code 2020, New York Stretch, except for section R403.6.2 of New York Stretch regarding mechanical ventilation requirements. The local law was filed at the Department of State Records Unit pursuant to the Municipal Home Rule Law on December 20th, 2021. On December 15th, 2021, less than 30 days after the adoption of Local Law Number 25 of 2021, the town filed a copy of Local Law Number 25 of 2021 with the Department of State for the Code Council's review pursuant to Subdivision 2 of Section 11-109 of the Energy Law. On July 10th, 2020 and September 16th, 2021, Nyserda presented to the Code Council a report indicating that New York Stretch Energy Code 2020 version 1.0, which modifies certain provisions of the 2018 International Energy Conservation Code and ASHRAE Standard 19.1 2016, is more restrictive than the currently effective version of the State Energy Code. On December 3rd, 2021, Nyserda presented to the Code Council a report indicating New York Stretch Energy Code 2020 version 1.0, with section 403.6.2 removed, is still more restrictive than the currently effective version of the State Energy Code. The town of Southampton's Local Energy Conservation Construction Code, as amended by Local Law Number 25 of 2021, adopts the 2020 Energy Conservation Construction Code of New York State, Icc NYS, as modified in the manner contemplated by New York Stretch Energy Code 2020, provided, however, that section R403.6.2 added to the 2018 IECC by New York Stretch shall not be deemed to be added to the 2020 ECCC NYS. The Local Energy Conservation Construction Code also requires A, dwellings to be rated and verified by Home Energy Rating System rater, HERS rater, or equivalent. B, Energy Rating Index, ERI, of either 50 or 35, depending on the size of the dwelling, where the State Energy Code requires a maximum of 62 for the same climate zone. 4. And C, adoption of New York Stretch Appendices CB, rated R value of insulation for commercial, and CC, additional power distribution systems. I move that the Code Council determine pursuant to Subdivision 2 of Section 11-109 of the Energy Law that the town of Southampton's Local Energy Conservation Construction Code, as amended by Local Law Number 25 of 2021, is more restrictive than the currently effective version of the State Energy Code, provided that the town's Local Energy Conservation Construction Code is at all times interpreted and enforced by the town's Landmark and Historic District Board and by the town's Chief Building Inspector in accordance with the following condition. No waiver of the energy rating requirement granted under Town Code Section 123-37B4 and no waiver on the basis that the structure is of historic significance granted under Town Code Section 123-37D can waive or modify any provision or requirement of the state energy code. The Code Council makes no finding or determination regarding any provision in the Town of Southampton's local energy code that may be a local standard for construction within the meaning of Section 379 of the Executive Law, and nothing herein shall be construed as the Code Council's approval or adoption of any such local standard for construction. So moved.
Thank you, Peniota. I'm glad you were still there. I really didn't want to have to read that. And if I ever have to, I will shorten these on the fly, just so you know. So don't get lost. May I have a second of that motion?
Second.
Robert seconds the motion, and we're back to that, okay? Is there any discussion on the motion? All right. Kevin, if you will call the roll.
Matt Tebow.
Yes.
Ben Keller.
Yes.
Vincent Rappaciulo.
Yes.
Joseph DeStefano.
Yes.
Claudia Bramer.
Yes.
Joseph Toomey.
Yes.
Sean Hamlin.
Yes.
Timothy DeRusher.
Yes.
Robert Hughes.
Yes.
William Tyne.
Yes.
Patrick Dolan.
Yes.
Dominic Marinelli.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. Kevin, if you'll let the Town of Southampton know of the council's decision. Okay, the next one on the agenda, Town of East Hampton is off because they've rescinded their local law. I assume they'll be back at some point, but until then, we jump over them. And the last one in this section, Town of Newcastle, local law number 1. Emma.
Thank you. The Newcastle adopted New York Stretch as a supplement to the state energy code with some additional limitations. The local law was filed within 30 days of adoption. During the analysis of the local law, the division came up with a few questions regarding the process for design and construction document submittal, as well as questions about how the local law as written would be enforced. We posed those questions to the municipality. They're aware of the questions and are working on them. However, similar to what happened, actually, we didn't even discuss that one. So the local law includes language that indicates that New York Stretch, as a supplement to the state code, shall be effective unless superseded by more restrictive provisions, and that's unquote, unless superseded by more restrictive provisions. Once again, the Code Council has previously found local laws using such language to be not more restrictive than the state energy code because without specifically identifying all the provisions of the local energy conservation code, the town cannot demonstrate that the local energy conservation construction code is indeed more restrictive than the state energy code. Therefore, we recommend, that the division recommends that the Code Council find the filing for the town of Newcastle to be not more restrictive than the state energy code.
Okay, so Emma, we asked them to rescind and refile in a way that might be more compliant. We worked with them, we tried, right?
So I don't know that we asked them so much as we flagged the concerns for them. We explained how there is a precedent for other municipalities that use similar languages and the reasons why they were found to be more restrictive. They understood the concerns. We explained to them that while we were at it, right there, we had other questions on the mechanics of the energy code and what the requirements that they put in place and how one may go about meeting those requirements and how the code official may go about verifying compliance based on those requirements. That I think they understood our concerns. We left that door open in case they want to come back with additional questions. They indicated that they intend to repeal that local law, adopt it with modified language that addresses those concerns.
Okay. All right. Well, shame they didn't do it before this meeting, but okay, that's fine. I understand. They have schedules the same way we do. So, okay. Any other questions on this? Okay. Hearing none. Peniota, if you could read the last motion in this section for the town of Newcastle.
Gladly. On December 7th, 2021, the town of Newcastle, adopted local law number 7 of 2021, which amended the town of Newcastle code, the town code, to adopt New York Stretch Energy Code 2020, New York Stretch. Local law number 7 of 2021 was filed with the Department of State Records Unit pursuant to Municipal Home Rule Law on December 24th, 2021. On December 28, 2021, less than 30 days after the adoption of Local Law Number 7 of 2021, the town filed a copy of Local Law Number 7 of 2021 with the Department of State for the Code Council's review pursuant to Subdivision 2 of Section 11-109 of the Energy Law. On July 10, 2020 and September 16, 2021, Nyserda presented to the Code Council a report indicating that New York Stretch Energy Code 2020 version 1.0, which modifies certain provisions of the 2018 International Energy Conservation Code and ASHRAE Standard 90.1 2016, is more restrictive than the currently effective version of the State Energy Code. On December 3, 2021, Nyserda presented to the Code Council a report indicating New York Stretch Energy Code 2020 version 1.0, the section 403.6.2 removed, is still more restrictive than the currently effective version of the State Energy Code. The Town of Newcastle's Local Energy Conservation Construction Code, as amended by Local Law Number 7 of 2021, as written, adopts New York Stretch as a supplement to the State Energy Code, unless superseded by more restrictive provisions adopted by the Town of Newcastle or New York State. And only section R403.6.2 of New York Stretch is specifically identified as being severed from the town's adoption of the local law. Without specifically identifying all provisions of the Town of Newcastle's Local Energy Conservation Construction Code, the town cannot demonstrate that the Local Energy Conservation Construction Code is indeed more restrictive than the State Energy Code. I move that the Code Council determine, pursuant to Subdivision 2 of Section 11-109 of the Energy Law, that the Town of Newcastle's Local Energy Conservation Construction Code, as amended by Local Law Number 7 of 2021, is not more restrictive than the currently effective version of the State Energy Code. So moved.
Thank you, Peniota. May I have a second to that motion?
Second.
Who was that? Sorry, who was that?
Dolan.
Dolan.
Pat Dolan. Thank you. Pat Dolan seconds the motion. Is there any questions, discussions on the motion? All right, hearing none. A yes vote here will be to find it not more restrictive and therefore not allow enforcement based on staff's analysis. So, Kevin, if you could read the motion, read the roll, please.
Newcastle. So, Matt Tebow.
I vote yes, not more restrictive.
Ben Keller.
Yes.
Vincent Rappaciullo.
Yes.
Joseph DeStefano.
Yes.
Claudia Bramer.
Yes.
Joseph Toomey.
Yes.
Sean Hamlin.
Yes.
Timothy DeRuscher.
Yes.
Robert Hughes.
Yes.
William Tyne.
Yes.
Patrick Dolan.
Yes.
Dominic Marinelli.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. Kevin, please let them know. Okay. That concludes. That one. All right. Moving on to agenda item number 7. This is more restrictive local standards for construction under Executive Law Section 379. We only have one under this category today. That's the Village of Elmsford, Local Law Number 2 of 2021. I'm going to turn it over to Chad to handle the staff analysis and the summary and to take any questions from the council. I'll note that we also have the village engineer and the chief of the village fire department online. Yes, we do. Okay, so I believe we're going to kick to them as well to speak. Okay, good. All right, but let's start with Chad. Chad, if you could take us through it.
So the village passed their local law on June 7th, 2021. It's submitted by the village mayor to us on July 6th, 21. That was 29 days within the required 30 days. Petition requests the Code Council to approve the standard for construction imposed by the village's local law number 2 of 21. The local law 2 of 21 repeals and replaces chapter 282 of the village code with new provisions for sprinklers. They originally had proposed sprinkler provisions going back to 1989 local law number 2. We were unable to find any recollection of them actually coming before the Code Council for that local law number 2 of 89. This new law is broken down in 4 parts, and so 282-1A requires all new buildings to have sprinklers, including single-family homes and 2-family homes. And this is, the important factor is they require it to be in accordance with Nfpa standards, current Nfpa standards. 282(1)(b) prohibits the issuance of any building permit without an approved sprinkler plan prepared in accordance with the engineer. 282-1C requires sprinklers for existing buildings and structures or occupancies that do not currently have a sprinkler conforming to NFPA standards, and that when they either increase their floor area by 50% within 6 months, the project increases the floor area by 50% within 6 months, or they are converting to A occupancy, which is for assembly. And again, the plans must be submitted in accordance with A, which means it's according to NFPA standards. And this does exempt the single-family and two-family residences. Now, 282D prohibits the issuance of a certificate of occupancy for any that does not have an NFPA sprinkler installed, inspected, tested, and approved. 282A and C are both standards for construction, while B and D are administrative and enforcement pertaining to A and C. So 282A, the requirement for all new buildings, kind of differs from the Uniform Code. In the Uniform Code, we rely on Section 903 in the Building Code, where sprinklers are required. And in the Residential Code, we require for townhouses, owner-occupied lodging houses with 5 or fewer guests, and live-work units located in townhouses. Therefore, adding the requirements for sprinklers is generally more restrictive. However, we have to look at what standards are used. And for the Residential Code, we use Section P2904 of the Residential Code and NFPA 13D. The Building Code basically requires NFPA 13, 13D, or 13R, depending on the structure. And it does also allow for alternative fire suppression systems. So if we look back at the standard for, in the local law, it says the current standard, and that could be interpreted as, one, the standard that is currently adopted by the Uniform Code, or probably more likely to be what's the current version that NFPA has published today, which would be the 19 or the 21 code, or I guess the 21 code currently. And those have not been evaluated, and so we would have to do a thorough analysis to ensure that that is not less restrictive than the current standards. Now, when we look at 282C, the one dealing with existing buildings, the comparative would be Appendix J for the Residential Code, which require the installation of automatic sprinkler systems for any one family, two family that undergoes a number of different scenarios. One example is a habitable attic, which was mentioned earlier, when we create a third story above the grade plane. And in the Building Code, one example would be the change of occupancy. In this section, we require an automatic sprinkler system when we switch from one occupancy to another that would require sprinklers according to the Building Code. Although the requirements for fire sprinkler systems to be installed in all new buildings on the surface is more restrictive than the Uniform Code, the reasons and examples just noted would make it less restrictive than the Uniform Code. The village, as part of their submittal, provided that they had some special conditions. One, they're totally surrounded by the town of Greenberg, which has a sprinkler provision. Greenberg and Elmsford, the two towns, or the town and the village, are both served by the same fire departments. And the fire department has requested that they enact similar law. So conformance to accepted engineering practices, the concept of installing a fire sprinkler system in a building to protect against spread of fire in general is accepted engineering fire prevention practice. The 2021 local law does not specifically identify what the standards are. They just have the general statement of Nfpa standards, current Nfpa standards. They do not define what a fire sprinkler system is. We would presume it's something complying with Nfpa 13, 13R, or 13D. It does not recognize the other standards, such as Section P 2904 of the Residential Code. And it does not recognize the alternative fire suppression systems, such as a carbon dioxide system or a halon system or many others. So sorry, getting all these notifications. So group H occupancy that stores a water reactive substance under the Uniform Code would have to get a fire sprinkler system, where a group H occupancy that is converted from something else may not need a fire sprinkler system in accordance with the Nfpa system and wouldn't recognize an alternative system. And in that case, that would potentially cause more damage if it's a water reactive substance and you install a sprinkler, and it could lead to the potential loss of life or property. The other thing the town code does is it does not recognize the small storage buildings. It says all buildings, including one in single-family structures for new construction. So this would mean your backyard shed would likely have to get a sprinkler system. So they do not look at the cost of installing a sprinkler system that would likely exceed the cost of a building. And the hazard or threat to life and safety would not benefit from that cost of construction. The standards imposed by the Village Code, Section 282(1)(a) and C, as amended by the 2021 local law, does not appear to generally conform with accepted engineering and fire prevention practices, as it does not permit the use of widely accepted alternative automatic fire extinguishing systems that may be better serve the intent of the automatic fire suppression system, and it does not consider the typical cost-benefit calculation to justify fire suppression systems in all types of buildings. For general conformance with purposes of Article 18, the village submitted Exhibit E of the petition, which only affirmed that it was done in the purposes of Article 18, but provided no supporting evidence that content of the local law complies with Article 18. The standards imposed by the village, Chapter 282, as added by local law 2 of 2021, intended to provide a level of protection from the hazard of fire that are higher than the level of protection than provided by the Uniform Code. However, inadvertently created conditions where the village is actually creating a less restrictive provision to the Uniform Code. Therefore, in conclusion, based on the information provided to the Code Council in the staff analysis, the division is recommending the Code Council find and determine that the standards for construction imposed by Section 282(a) and C, the Village Code as amended by the 2021 local law, are less restrictive than the Uniform Code, do not conform with accepted engineering fire prevention practices, do not meet the purposes of Article 18.
Okay, thanks, Chad. I think before we move to questions for Chad, it's probably appropriate to now hear from representatives from the village and the village fire department if they'd like to make a statement to the council. I'm stalling here for a second because I know it takes Kevin a minute to manipulate the system, and he'll tell them when their mics are live.
Yes, so Antonio, I'm going to start with you. I'm going to unmute your mic now if you wish to make a statement.
Can you hear me now?
There you go, sorry.
Ken.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to try and keep my comments brief. I know I'm last on the agenda and in between you and your lunch. On behalf of the mayor, the board, and the fire chief who's on the call, I thank you for considering our application today. This law was modeled after the existing Town of Greenberg law, which was approved by this council in 1996. And I know a lot happens in 25 years. But in fact, that wording regarding the Nfpa and fire sprinklers were taken from their law verbatim. I thought I was doing the right thing there. So if you could picture the Town of Greenberg as a 36 square mile donut, Elmsford is a 1 square mile hole in the middle. So Greenberg has sprinklers, Elmsford does not, and that's why part of the reason we felt it would make more sense to have the more restrictive sprinkler requirement applied to the village also. That coupled with our small side yard setbacks of 5 to 7 feet and some older homes in the village that are actually arm's length apart, the village would benefit, plus the fact that we have a volunteer fire department, which is a fantastic department, especially if the chief is listening. But we're just, there's just with a volunteer department, there's a little more response time involved with getting to the fire. So that's why we thought we would benefit from this law. And reading through the comments from the staff, which are very thorough, I see that there's some holes in the law as written. So not sure what the next steps are, but if this is not going to be acceptable, I was hoping that we could get a sense from the board or from the council on whether if we came back, hired a code consultant, fix this law to meet all the requirements, if this is something that would be entertained, or if we're just spinning our wheels, wasting your time and taxpayer dollars by trying to come back if this is not acceptable. So I wanted to at least hopefully get a handle on that if this is something that's not going to be acceptable to the council. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Antonio asked a question there, and I don't know. I'm thinking about whether I should jump to the chief or talk about that question. I think probably it's appropriate to talk about the question, try and keep everything in order here. I can't speak for the council. We haven't voted yet, so this is a premature discussion. But if it were to fail, and we've had some fail in the past, obviously, I've directed staff to work with the community involved and try and get to a place where their local law would be more restrictive. Special conditions obviously is a discussion point. I think that with regard to this, I'm going to drop out any question of special conditions from the motion that I'm going to make, and we're just going to deal with this on the more restrictive, less restrictive, and engineering principles ground. So, going back a sec, I'm just going to say that, obviously, I can't tell you what the council is going to do in 5 minutes. I certainly can't tell you what they're going to do 3 months from now, the next time they meet. But I would ask, if it fails today, I would ask Kevin and staff, and well, it's business, it's building, so it's Kevin. I would ask Kevin to work with your community and try and get a local law that is more restrictive and therefore acceptable, and work through the other issues that need to be worked through in order to get to a yes. I apologize. I know the chief was waiting, but I just wanted to keep that sort of in order. So, Kevin, if you could unmute the chief for me, please.
Yes, Chief Malone, I'm going to unmute you now. Should be good.
Good morning, good afternoon. Chief Eugene Malone, Chief of the Elmsford Fire Department. In addition to being the volunteer fire chief, I'm also a code enforcement officer for the state, and I'm also a fire investigator for Westchester County. And I know firsthand, going to many fires in the past 20 years, sprinklers have proven themselves time and time again to save property and give the fire department an opportunity to make a positive attack on a building that's being subjected to a fire. Again, as stated, we protect the parts of the town of Greenberg, and those buildings are commercial in most cases, and those sprinklers had worked to our advantage, limiting damage and limiting loss of income to the property that's sustaining the fire. I would like to see this also covered in the village, because all of a sudden we're starting to, a small sleepy community is now developing a lot of large commercial spaces, and we weren't able to provide the coverage that we deem necessary to keep the village safe. I would like to get any information or impact, if this law does not go through, how we can go about securing a sprinkler law that will benefit the taxpayers in the community of Elmsford. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Okay, we're back in the process here where it's open to the council to ask any questions of Chad and Kevin and potentially myself. So I open it up to the council. Is there discussion?
Chairman Tebow, this is Ben Keller. I have a couple of questions.
Sure, Ben. Ben from New York.
Ask the chief. So from what I understand, reading through the previous laws, in the village, they've had a law in the books for 33 years now requiring sprinkler systems in most of their residences, as well as a laundry list of other properties. And the town of Greenberg has a 26-year history of having sprinkler systems required. What type of statistics do they have relative to other neighboring communities regarding fire loss of similar sized communities? Does he have any anecdotal evidence, or have they been keeping statistics related to that?
Sure, give me just a second to open up. We've opened up the chief's. Yep. All right, Chief, your mic is open if you'd like to respond to Mr. Keller.
I don't have the data from the town of Greenberg. I was a career firefighter in a fire district that covered the town of Greenberg unincorporated area, and we had several fires. I don't have a list of how many, but commercial as well as residential fires, sprinklers had kept the fire at bay until the fire department arrived to finish the mop up. To come out with a specific number, I don't have anything offhand. And as far as the other communities, again, I do fire investigations in the southern part of Westchester County, and several municipalities have had buildings that were sprinkler protected, and they obviously did their job, allowing the fire department to come in and clean up the mess prior to a total loss of the building. If research is needed, I'll be glad to do that, but as of right now, I have no numbers at hand.
Ben? Do you have any other questions, Ben?
No, I just want to take the opportunity to commend Elmsford and the town of Greenberg for taking the sprinkler initiatives at a local level. Obviously, they're at the front lines there with their communities, and they have the community input and support. And I just wanted to say, from the fire service perspective, I commend them for their efforts to have a local law regarding sprinkler systems.
Okay. Are there other questions? Tim?
So I would also like to commend the village in doing the same and right thing. While it was very descriptively provided about some of the open issues that may be involved in this local law, it is indeed good fire prevention and good engineering practice to provide fire sprinkler protection to get a higher level of safety for both constituents and first responders. So it's, I wanted to clarify that anything that I vote on today would be in support of this proper fire safety improvements to those constituents and first responders, and not necessarily on procedural provisions or inadvertent provisions that are a reason to deny this local law that's existed for many decades.
Fair enough, Tim. Are there other comments, questions, discussion?
No, just
Bill, go ahead.
Well, I
Joel.
guess my first question is, it seems as though the principal rationale for this is that the larger town that surrounds the village already has this code on the books, and it was approved by this council in 1996, which was well before my time. And I am just wondering if there is anybody at a staff level that has any kind of institutional knowledge of how that happened. How did they get something that is not in compliance with the rest of the state? What justification did they have to be not uniform with the code everywhere else? I'm still looking at the map and looking at these places in Westchester, which I've traveled through many of these communities, and I honestly, truthfully, don't see where this community is a whole lot different in pattern and form than any other up and down the Hudson Valley or in many places in upstate New York, whether they're suburban towns or suburban villages. It's all very similar, and I don't quite get how the town got this sort of approval back in 1996.
So I can address that. As I'm sure everyone's probably aware, some of this information is buried deeply in the state archives at this point. So we did do a lot of digging, and actually just this week, Chad was able to dig up some information on it, and it appears as though the town of Greenburgh had a local law for sprinklers in 1977, which predates the uniform code. And so then after that, they approached the code council for approval based on having had this prior to the uniform code's existence. And I believe that our current understanding is that is why it was previously approved.
And in 96, they had the approval and they reconfigured all their all their village code. And so it was kind of we have it approved already, so we're going to approve it again. It was kind of the rationale in 96.
Thank you for that thoroughness and the research that you put in on this in advance. I'm impressed. Thanks.
Thanks. I think Joe's next, and then Tim. Joe.
I think, having listened to Chad, in 96, Nfpa may not have had their qualifications, so therefore, 26 years later, using the same language from 96, it doesn't meet today's standards. So as Tim had said, I'd like to, commend them for what they're recommending, and I'd like to see it follow today's laws and whatever references they're going to. Let's make sure it's on the books properly.
Thanks, Joe. Tim?
Two other items. Don't forget, the uniform code still applies. While this local law may reference Nfpa standards, it doesn't say this specific standard or this specific standard. The local, the uniform code still applies. So if it was in a commercial building, you'd have to use Nfpa 13 by the code today compared to, say it was in a one-family home, you'd have to use 13D or P2904. So I'm not sure that's the total big hang-up that's here, but I think I've been involved in code enforcement and development in New York State since 1983. I've sat on a number of different technical subcommittees when New York adopted the Icc codes back in early 2000s. The whole concept of having a uniform fire prevention and building code was there for a reason, so that there would be at least some level of minimum requirements in the state. During that entire time, my personal experience has never been that this is a mini-max code, minimum and a maximum both. And the concepts that have been put forth recently in recent years to prove that you're unique and varying degrees of that, how that's proven has changed over time. So however that is dealt with going forward, that's certainly not for me to decide, but to take the home rule away from home jurisdictions, I think goes exactly opposite of what that uniform code was started from back in the early 80s. That's just commentary. People can think and do what they want to do with it.
Thanks, Tim. I'm going to jump in here and just take a chair's prerogative for a second, following up on what Joe said and what you just said. As I noted earlier, special conditions, and I think that's where you were going just a second ago, has become, it's very ill-defined in the statute, and it has become a will of this body, which is an ever-changing body. There are clearly different thinking and different personalities on this board through the last, even in my tenure as chair over the last 6 years, but certainly before that as well. So this is a hard target, I think, for municipalities to even walk. I don't think, the reason that I've asked Penny-Oda to pull the language out of the draft motion that you saw, this is the issue with sending draft motions early, but it helps everyone follow along, so it was worth it. But the reason I asked her to pull that language out is from my perspective, I can actually see a way of getting there right now. I know we've been, as a body, we've been pretty tight on this, especially over, through Ron Peaster and my tenure as chair. But in this situation, this is a fairly unique situation because we have a municipality surrounding a municipality, and the municipality on the outside has this, the inside is applying for this, and the village fire is protecting the entire area. So that's a fairly unique circumstance to me. And actually, we're almost creating a non-uniform code in that region. Now, this is just my thinking. I'm just putting it out there, and that's why I don't think we should reach special conditions today. We can do that, as Joe points out, after after we resolve some of the conflict issues that we've noted, the less restrictive issues that we've noted. That's why I said earlier that if this goes down, I would ask our staff to try and work through those issues and sort of help out with the language with regard to special conditions. So when they come back, we can evaluate that as a body. Maybe the body agrees with me, maybe they don't. That's a whole other thing that we'll figure out, I suppose, in June at the soonest, if it went down today. I know we're speaking in a lot of what could happen, but I'm trying to deal with this because I know there are a lot of different interests here on this body, and certainly the village has requested that help. Anybody else?
Robert. I would agree. I think colleagues have mentioned about it. I do understand the need for maybe each area of municipality to want a little bit more restrictive. I understand that. I think it's critical that the language is correct for enforcement locally. It always helps at that end to be crystal clear. With regards to the unique situation you just described, I agree. I think they do have a unique specific to that area, so that makes the argument. It's no different from any variance or any request for more restrictive. You are creating and explaining from a uniform code that is important. Have that consistency throughout New York State that you do have a situation locally and you have the ability to ask for more restrictive or a variance. That those mechanisms are in place. And I think you have to show the due cause of what the reasons for that. But I do think, just starting first, the language has to be correct and airtight as far as being able to understand from the public as well when they're reading it and grasp why they're doing something, and there's not confusion from one code to another. So that's just my comment there.
Thank you, Robert. Sean?
I'm also struggling with the idea of whether we have a uniform or not uniform. And you said that well. Second point regarding special conditions, I'm not sure what was described. We all know what a donut, and we know what a donut hole is. But there's no data relative to what's been going on for the past 25 years that at this point in time would justify making a change. And are we pulling that loose thread from the sleeve of a sweater because now the adjacent municipalities will say, well, we're next door to so-and-so, and we have a volunteer fire department too, and we're special because we're next to the donut. So I think I mean, for the years that I've been on this council, we were kind of had the, you know, the mantra, uniform, uniform, uniform. And I know this is on a very sensitive issue to some of my colleagues here relative to the issue that we discussed about sprinklers when we made the jump. And we in New York said, no, we weren't going to do that. So I know that's also a part of this very sensitive discussion. So I don't have any answer, but.
Thanks, Sean. I mean, your point is well taken. We had this body as constituted over the last, I'll only speak to my tenure, right? I can speak to Ron's a little bit because I was here, but I mean, this body has had a pretty bright line test with regard to special conditions. And if we were to grant one of these, I would think, and you know, this is evolving thinking, obviously, that it would have to be, in order to meet what I've seen from this body over the last few years, it would have to be extremely tight, right? It would have to be, and the only way that, again, I'm not going to make a motion that takes us here, but right today, because I don't think it's necessary, but certainly other members can do so if they want to. But I think this circumstance, I already thought about what you said about the next municipality and the next one after that, and suddenly you have a whole county, and now we are so far away from a uniform code that we might as well start to think about this on a state level, which I think we will probably do in the next code cycle anyway. And that is the correct, you know, statewide adoption uniform code is the correct way, I think, the way the legislature sees this body doing that. But stepping back, I think that this one does pull a little bit because there is some tightness there, because there's a nexus with the village fire department handling this entire area. So the next community couldn't necessarily say, oh, you know, we're next door, so we get this. Well, only if in that, you know, I'm trying to, because I think when I'm making motions, I'm trying to predict what the body's going to say. I think it would have to be very tight, but could be possible in this circumstance, depending on the will of the body. But again, you know, if we're talking about it now, that's good. You know, if this thing is going down based on less restrictive, as Robert pointed out, I think it needs to be tightened anyway. I don't think we've reached that right now. We don't have to reach that. So better to send it back, have them work with division and try and get there, and they can take their cue with what they want to do here based on what's being said right now on that other issue without actually ending that issue right now. Right?
Mr. Chairman, is it appropriate for this body to table this until the next meeting?
So
if that was a motion?
So I thought of that, and we could, obviously. I mean, we didn't even have to put it necessarily on the agenda, and I think if the village had said to us, we're going to rescind and work with you, then we would have done that because there would have been no reason to bring it before the body right now.
So can I jump in real quick? So initially we did have early conversations with the village about that concept, and we had given them much of this feedback already, and the village requested that it be presented to the council at this time. You know, I guess Penny Oda could jump in as far as, can they modify the local, you know, if they tabled it, could they modify the local law and come back with the same local law? Or is it something they actually would need to rescind, fix, and then do a new notice and petition?
To finish where I was going, thanks, Kevin. No, that was a good point. To fix where I'm going there, what I'm afraid of is if we don't act today, then we actually slow them down, right? Because I can see a circumstance where if we act if we act according to the motion that, you know, that I'm going to put forth, that, you know, it sounds like Robert's got it and Sean's got it, you know, they see where we're going. If we act and we deny, and these guys work with them for the next 3 months, they could come back to us with something that is more restrictive, and then we can, as a body, determine if there is an argument for special conditions in that circumstance. it gets them to a conclusion in June, whereas if we don't, there's no impetus. And then we could be doing this in June and push them back 3 months. So I'm trying to get them to a conclusion sooner, one way or the other, that they want. I mean, at least a potentiality of it.
So, Robert, question. Do we know, and I know they're not on the docket here, do we know the conflicts that the current approval from the local town that is surrounding them conflicts with the current code? Do we understand it? Because too long don't make a right. Just because this code has been on the docket, for so long, to automatically grant this, unfortunately, it is that many years later, and codes have increased and gotten better. So I'd be very curious to know the impact of that, where then this town, if it was granted, or this little village might be even in better shape or more restricted than the surrounding, which is their argument for having this in the first place.
Right. Building a special condition based on another community is interesting, especially when it comes from long before this code. I will say, before Kevin responds, I will say, I think in the next code adoption cycle, when we get to the cutting edge of 2024, we're going to have to, as we always do, request and kind of push communities who have current more restrictive local standards to make sure that they're more restrictive, because the code in 3 years, 6 years, 9 years clearly evolves and becomes more restrictive itself in certain circumstances, less in others, but in certain circumstances, certainly over 30 years, Robert, you're right. I mean, they could be very far from the restrictiveness of the current code. Kevin?
Yeah, I think, I forget who mentioned it before, but a code in 1996 or 89 referencing current Nfpa standards may have been more strict than the currently effective uniform code. Based on today's standards, does that language apply perfectly anymore? It appears as though it may not. But I think we do run this issue with any MRLS we've approved in the past. Every code cycle, we do send a letter to the municipalities, all municipalities, to say, if you have an MRLS, you need to review it against the current code and validate yourself whether or not it still, in fact, is more restrictive. We don't necessarily police each individual municipality after that.
But I mean, food for thought for the members of this council as we move into that next code cycle and beyond. This council, I believe, does have authority to chop more restrictive local standards that were approved previously at a certain point or in total. So that's something we could consider. I think that might create a bit of a wasteland out there, and certainly would require a lot of thought, but this council does have that authority because of the point that you're making right now. Sean?
One other thing that just rang in my head when Chad was reading through, the real issue that I think we have regarding sprinklers in our discussion, even in the past, was when it went to single-family homes. That was really, I think, the trip up, if I recall. And in your response, or currently in that town, do they have seen that requirement, or the donut area, are they truly enforcing that? So if I walk in to build a single family home, I have to have a 13D?
So for Greenberg law, it says basically a similar language. It says any building built since 77 has had a sprinkler system installed. For Elmsford, I'm gonna have to double check that, but.
Can we just ask the gentleman on the phone, the fire chief?
Oh, that's a good point. The fire chief covers that area, so we can ask
the code enforcement. Yeah.
Chief, if you're still on, we're going to unmute you.
Yep, so I'm going to unmute Chief Malone.
Yes, I'm here.
Should be unmuted. There you are.
Chief, did you hear Mr. Hamlin's question about the surrounding area? Are you requiring sprinklers, or is that area, the town outside of the village, requiring sprinklers in every building?
Yes. In the town of Greenberg, the town of Greenberg is and we protect the fire protection of the town of Greenberg, and even the unincorporated areas of the town of Greenberg, that sprinkler law applies. So the municipality, the Fairview Fire District, Hartsdale Fire District, and Greenville Fire District, which encompasses the unincorporated areas of the town, they are under that sprinkler law, which includes 1 and 2 family dwellings. If I answered the question.
Seems like an excellent case for looking at statistics, fire statistics.
It does.
Thank you,
But I
Chief.
also wonder what their housing stock is, the age of their housing stock in Elmsford, which is in Westchester County.
Right.
It's not new, I'm guessing.
Right, right, yeah, you're right, you'd have to balance any statistics against how many buildings were built before 1977.
Yeah.
But it's a great study opportunity,
Yeah.
and I completely agree, and it's a comparative analysis with the adjoining communities that don't have this in place, and what has been the impact on building permit activity and the type of housing that's created. Does it have any kind of an impact in that regard? There's a lot of things to consider here, and this could be a really good test, sort of an empirical laboratory to find out how these codes actually do impact the choices that homeowners make. I would love to see a lot more data on this, and I don't want to belabor this because I really don't want to get into a sprinkler, no sprinkler debate, but I do want to say that the logic is often applied that sprinklers, life safety issues aside, a big part of it is response time. It gives people, emergency and first responders more additional response time. And the logic that the hole in the donut, which it seems to me that's where the fire department is right in the middle of the donut. So the response issue to get to the extremities of the donut is probably more important to me than it is when it's, homes that are right next to the fire department. But again, I'm not really looking to go down that road today. It's a debate for another day, in my opinion. So, thank you.
Thanks. I see Claudia raising her hand. Claudia.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to chime in quickly as a local government representative on this council. I'm inclined to find that there would be special conditions here, given the center of the donut hole, as we've been talking about. I, of course, respect our staff's analysis as well. They did say that, portions of this are more restrictive and that there are some technical problems. So I just wanted to put that out for you, Chairman, as you're considering the motion that you're about to make, and that some of these things may be a discussion for down the road, as was just mentioned. But if we're taking a vote today, those are my thoughts on this. Thank you.
I appreciate them, Claudia, and actually I appreciate all the comments that have been made, because I think the council is answering the village engineer's question a little better than I did, right? By just listening to what's being said today, I think you're seeing, if this fails today, and if you modified to make sure that it's more restrictive across the board, and you came back, you're starting to see how that discussion of special conditions would line up based on the special condition that you put forward. And again, the reason that my motion, at least today, is not going to reach that, because I don't see the need today to do that. Any other discussion points? Okay. Well, here we go. Okay, closing discussion. We move to Peniota to read the motion that I put forth. I've communicated with Peniota what I want. So if you note that something drops out in the draft, you know what. Go ahead, Peniota. I see why I can't see her. She's up in that corner.
On or about June 7th, 2021, the Village of Elmsford, the Village, enacted Local Law Number 2 of 2021, the local law, which amended Chapter 282 to the Code of the Village of Elmsford, the Village Code. The local law was filed at the Department of State Records Unit pursuant to the Municipal Home Rule Law on July 7th, 2021. On or about July 6, 2021, less than 30 days after the local law was enacted, the village mayor submitted a copy of the local law and petition relating to the local law to the Code Council pursuant to Executive Law Section 379. I move as follows. First, I move that the Code Council determine pursuant to Executive Law Section 379, Subdivision 1, that the standards imposed by Section 282-1 of the Village Code, as added by the local law, include provisions that are less stringent and less restrictive than the standards imposed by the Uniform Fire Prevention and Building Code, the Uniform Code. Second, I move that the Code Council find pursuant to Executive Law Section 379, Subdivision 2, that the standards for construction imposed by Section 282-1 of the Village Code, as added by the local law, include provisions that do not conform with accepted engineering and fire prevention practices and the purposes of Article 18 of the Executive Law. And third, based on the foregoing determination and findings, I move that the Code Council deny the Village's request that the Code Council adopt or approve the standards imposed by Section 282-1 of the Village Code, as added by the local law. So moved.
Okay, thank you. Can I have a second to that motion?
Second.
Okay, Robert Hughes seconds the motion. Okay, I'm going to remember my Robert's rules here for half a second, and I'm going to say, is there any discussion on the motion or any potential amendments to the motion? Okay, hearing none, then I move to Kevin to call the roll on the motion. A yes vote in this situation will be to deny based on the motion read, which basically at this point is it is less restrictive. Kevin?
Matt Tebow.
I vote yes.
Ben Keller.
Yes.
Vincent Rappaciulo.
Yes.
Joseph DeStefano.
Yes.
Claudia Bramer.
Yes.
Joseph Toomey.
Yes.
Sean Hamlin.
Yes.
Timothy DeRuscher.
Based on my previous statements, no.
Robert Hughes.
Yes.
William Tyne.
Yes. Yes.
Patrick Dolan.
Yes.
Dominic Marinelli.
Yes.
Motion carries. Okay, motion carries. So I am now at this point going to direct staff to work with the village to make it so to hopefully come to a situation where they can send us back a more restrictive local law, and then we'll deal with that when it comes back. Okay. Kevin? Okay, that was a long time, so I've got to log back in and then type my password wrong. Okay, we're having one of these days. All right, we're on to agenda item number 8, other more restrictive local standards and energy code filings. So Kevin's just going to take us through what's still in the queue that didn't make it into today's agenda. Kevin, go ahead.
All right, some of these you may have heard before, but there's a little bit of an update since the last Code Council meeting. The first one is the town of Bethel submitted a notice of petition pursuant to Executive Law Section 379 and a filing pursuant to Energy Law Section 11-109 for the town's adoption of New York Stretch. Since the last Code Council meeting, the town of Bethel has indicated that they have enacted a local law that rescinded the portion of New York Stretch that required the filing and notice of petition and requested that their notice of petition be withdrawn. The town has not provided a new filing of the new local law pursuant to Energy Law Section 11-109. However, staff has made the town aware of the process and the timeframes, so action on that town is recommended at this time. The city and town of Ithaca adopted a local green code and submitted a filing pursuant to Energy Law Section 11-109. The division has received some supplemental information on November 16th, 2021, following the initial submission, and staff is continuing to review that information and work directly with the municipalities in order to present the division's findings to the Code Council. The Village of Saltaire submitted a notice of petition pursuant to Executive Law Section 379 for a local law that requires automatic sprinkler systems in new and some modified existing buildings. The village subsequently withdrew their notice of petition with the intention on making several revisions, adopting a new local law, and submitting a new notice and petition. The City of Kingston submitted both a notice and petition pursuant to Executive Law Section 379 and a filing pursuant to Energy Law Section 11-109 for the city's adoption of New York Stretch. At the time of submission, the city requested their local law not be presented to the Code Council until the city is able to provide some additional supplemental information. To date, the division has not received any additional information. The division continues to reach out to the city through phone calls and emails with no additional responses from the city. The division is also working with Nyserda to coordinate directly with the city. Therefore, until we hear back from the city, the division doesn't have any recommendations at this time. The Village of Tully submitted a filing pursuant to Energy Law Section 11-109 for the village's adoption of New York Stretch on February 25th, 2022. It was filed with the Co-Council more than 30 days from the adoption and is therefore not enforceable until the Code Council acts. However, having been received just 1 week prior to the Co-Council meeting and appearing to be embedded with a host of other changes to the village code that would need to be reviewed to determine if there are any impacts on the energy code, Division staff needs additional time to complete the review and provide a recommendation. Lastly, the Village of Hastings-on-Hudson adopted a local law for New York Stretch over a year ago, but just recently submitted a notice and petition to the division outside of the 30-day requirement. DOS has spoken with the village manager and the village attorney, and the village is working on additional information and the potential adoption of a subsequent local law with a new submission. Therefore, again, no recommendation at this time.
Thank you, Kevin. Are there any questions on any of those? A few of those dropped off literally in the last week, so I've been briefed on them, which is interesting. Okay, that moves us to Agenda 9. We're coming down the home stretch. I thank everyone's patience. I know these last 2 meetings have been a slog, but we're doing the work. Kevin, work group updates?
So the first work group, we have distributed the final document, was included in the packet to the co-council members. You'll note most items require no additional action on the part of the code council. Several items at the end would necessitate during the next code update, which we kind of talked about at the beginning of this meeting, the timeframes and schedules for that. I would definitely anticipate discussion by the co-council as to the direction in which the co-council wishes to go on those particular topics. The topics include automatic sprinkler systems for townhouses and the automatic sprinkler system provisions for 55 feet versus 30 feet. Additionally, staff is looking into the performance code option as outlined in the summary documents that everybody received.
Comment?
Yes.
Yeah, just the emergency responder radio coverage in existing buildings, I think we agreed to include in the next round of code updates with some kind of a trigger, threshold, other type of work to institute that, to be able to let firefighters, EMS, police communicate in specific buildings, even though they're existing. So I want to make sure that the no action doesn't imply that we don't have to do anything. There is certainly something there that we need to do.
Yes, thank you. I guess to the point of no action means that the group came to a consensus as to what direction they would like to pitch to the code council versus the several that do have action did not come to a consensus within the group.
Got it.
Thank you, Tim.
Okay. Any other questions before we move to the other work group? Okay, hearing none. Kevin?
Okay, so the second work group we've termed the Building Assessment Work Group. The group has met and traded several emails with the most recent discussion in relation to the December 7th, 2021 virtual discussion that was hosted by Icc. The main takeaways from the December meeting were that the host noted the intent is not to discuss the cause of the collapse because everybody is still waiting on the NYSERDA report. There are a lot of jurisdictions that may not have maintenance provisions at all or lack the enforcement of those maintenance provisions that do exist. And Icc is working on a non-mandatory guideline for building safety professionals and jurisdictions to assist in managing maintenance and inspections for existing buildings. There is a video available for the December 7th meeting if anyone would like to view it if they were unable to attend. And then subsequently to that, the group has determined additional meetings are not necessary until more information on the subject is provided by either the NYSERDA report or Icc.
Thank you, Kevin. Are there any questions related to that? Okay. Hearing none. All right. Moving to the public comment period. Agenda item number 10. Kevin, you had at least one on my list anyway. Is he here? Or?
So Alan Feltoon is present. So Alan, I will unmute you. I know you said you wanted to speak only under certain circumstances, but I'll unmute you and you can have the floor.
But I'm I'm not keeping anybody from lunch. My comments were going to have to do with the building collapse. We didn't talk about it. So as those things come up, I represent the International Masonry Institute and also the Bricklayers and Allied Craft Workers. So we're a party of interest. For those that did not see it, there was an article about this in the New York Times Magazine on January 30th. It's in print, starts on page 28, but you can also get a copy of it online. So with that, for the day, I'll just keep an eye out for the upcoming meetings.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Any others?
Do not have anyone else requesting to speak.
Okay, we don't have anyone else requesting to speak, so we'll leave it for a half a second here to see if anybody pops up in Kevin's view. Okay, Kevin has shaken his head, so we're moving to agenda item 11. That's future meetings. I'll announce that for the 2022 schedule, it looks like we, in order to handle the grease interceptors situation, we may need to move our meeting to June 17th. So, we'll be in touch with members to check availability, to make sure we're good there as we approach. If not, we'll seek an alternate date that still fits. We also have a September 23rd meeting and a December 9th meeting on the schedule at present, and I will endeavor to keep us to the schedule so that everyone knows what's coming. That moves us to agenda item 12. Is there any other business to come before the council today? Okay, I don't see anybody popping up, so I'll close that, and I will thank everybody for their patience today. I know this was a long meeting, but I think it was a good meeting. We had some really great discussions that I think will help, especially John, Kevin, Emma, and others who are helping me move us forward here to figure out how to best move forward. So thank you all for your attendance today. I have a feeling in June we might all be in person, or through the link to New York only and Buffalo only. But with that, I'll make a motion to adjourn. All in favor of adjourning, signify by saying aye. 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 All right. Anybody want to keep going? No? Great. Everybody enjoy lunch. Thank you all.